My name is Ron, and I've been happily married to Lily for 15 years. Our family is a huge source of happiness for me, and I can really feel how much my wife loves me. Our marriage has grown in a way that makes me very happy. We're parents to two fantastic daughters in their early teens. Both of us have steady jobs. I work at a security company, and Lily is a voice translator at a film studio. We're healthy and live in a beautiful house in a nice area of the city. Life is great, and I don't think it could be any better. After our younger daughter was born, Lily gained some weight. However, her beautiful blue eyes, which stand out more behind her glasses, she doesn't use contact lenses because they bother her eyes when she reads or does paperwork, make her even more attractive. I'm deeply in love with Lily, and I know she loves me just as much. We have two amazing daughters, a comfortable house, and we don't worry about money. Everything was perfect in my life. But then, something bad happened after 15 years of marriage that could change everything and ruin my once perfect and happy life. Lately, Lily began a routine of hanging out with her women colleagues at various bars every other Friday. They rotate among 3 or 4 places they like. She goes out these Fridays to chat and relax after work, as she often tells me. I'm okay with her going out by herself. I get home by 4:30 every day to look after our daughters when she's out with her colleagues. On those nights, I make dinner for the girls and help them with homework, which I really enjoy. She typically gets back by 8, and then we spend the whole weekend together doing fun family activities and eating out with our daughters on Saturday night. But in recent months, she's been getting home later, around 10, on these girls' nights, and I've noticed she's had a few drinks. I didn't bring it up because she's still the same affectionate wife she's always been. Every time she returns from those nights out, she has this special smile that makes me want to hug her. I understand that her time with friends is her way to unwind and forget about a tough work week. I convinced myself it was just harmless fun with her colleagues, even if she started coming home later than before. Then, a few weeks ago on a Monday morning, I received an email from someone who signed it as a friend. I almost deleted the message without reading it, but I decided to give it a second thought. The email said they were at the Black Crow last Friday and saw Lily enjoying herself with a group, especially dancing with a man from her group. They attached a picture taken with their cell phone, asking me to examine it closely. This email had already planted doubts in my mind, and I feared what I might find out. Despite knowing Lily danced during these outings, the email mentioned male coworkers, something she never told me. I always thought it was only her female friends, even though she could have been dancing with someone already at the Black Crow, not part of their group. A lump formed in my throat, and I started feeling uneasy about the whole situation. Despite my reservations, I opened the attachment. The moment the picture appeared, I noticed it wasn't perfectly centered, suggesting the photographer was cautious to avoid being seen. I observed my wife's coworkers, both male and female, sitting at a long table in the background. The picture was somewhat blurry, but I could still make out my wife on the right side of the dance floor. She wore her beige blouse with red flowers and green leaves, along with matching brown slacks, the same outfit from her last girls' night out. So I deduced the picture was taken the previous Friday when she arrived home later than usual at 10:30, giving me a hug and her usual smile. In the photo, she was on the dance floor with a tall young man, embracing tightly with both arms around his neck. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. I couldn't recall ever dancing like that with Lily or any other girl in public. The man's lower body pressed tightly against her, and it seemed she could feel his hardness rubbing against her. He had to be aroused, as it's impossible not to be in that situation. Strangely, Lily didn't seem bothered. On the contrary, she appeared happy, pushing herself against him as they locked eyes. My wife, the mother of my daughters, was in the arms of a stranger, behaving provocatively in public. I couldn't believe what I saw. She wouldn't dance with me like that in public. Why was she letting a stranger act this way? Or was he truly a stranger? Doubt firmly took hold in my mind and grew fast, beyond my control. Various scenarios of my wife with other men played out, making me feel sick. I rushed to the bathroom where I threw up my breakfast. Lily, my wife, was acting inappropriately in public. Was she having an affair? How could she do this to me and our 2 daughters? Many questions flooded my mind. Who was that man? Did they work together? How long had this been happening? Why was she involved with him? Update. For the next 30 minutes, I stayed in my office bathroom, trying to clear my thoughts. Gradually, new emotions started emerging: disappointment, sadness, and anger, followed by a strong desire for revenge. A range of intense emotions took over me, creating a whirlwind of reactions. I felt the urge to kick Lily, to hug her and ask her to stop, or even consider divorcing her. Then, a moment later, I'd think of forgiving her and giving her another chance. As I sat on the toilet, I thought I was losing my mind. Eventually, I regained control, deciding to do nothing but wait and watch Lily before taking any action. Making emotionally influenced decisions without knowing the full truth wouldn't make sense. I needed to wait and not tell her about what I already knew. Simultaneously, I was determined to get to the bottom of it all, one way or another. I had to get solid proof of what was going on. Was she cheating on me, or was she just having exaggerated fun? However, I already knew she had lied by omitting the whole truth about her evenings out with the girls. Her movie studio was only a couple of blocks away from my workplace. Since I was often on the road for work, checking on Lily was easy. The next day, at 11:30, I parked at the end of her workplace's parking lot. Feeling relatively safe with tinted windows, I watched the exit door until 1 o'clock, but she never came out. I repeated this for the rest of the week, and on Friday at 12:15, I saw Lily and 3 others, a woman and 2 men, get into a black BMW. Lily sat in front next to the driver, and they drove away. Naturally, I followed them. They drove downtown, entered the parking lot of a fancy restaurant, and I observed them laughing as they went inside. Parked in front of the restaurant, I stayed in my car until they came out at 2. Lily walked next to the tall, light-haired man, the driver, the same man she had been dancing with in the photo I already had. She seemed very cheerful and excited, touching his arms as they talked. This, more than anything else, angered me. They drove back to her workplace and all went inside. So far, Lily hadn't done anything wrong except for not mentioning to me that she sometimes went out to eat with both male and female coworkers. More importantly, the 4 of them at lunch acted as if they were 2 couples, not friends or coworkers, and that bothered me the most. That Friday, Lily didn't go out with the girls after work and got home at 5:15, cheerful and smiling as usual. It took a lot of willpower to control myself and not bombard her with questions. However, I asked her once while quietly sitting in front of the television after supper if she had a good day at work, and then I inquired about her lunch. For a few seconds, I noticed she didn't know exactly what to say, but soon enough, she told me she ate the tuna sandwich she had prepared before leaving for work in the morning. Calling her a liar and maybe a cheater, I told myself Lily was looking at me with those big blue eyes that I loved so much as she told that blatant lie. Although my anger was building, I still felt an urge to reach out and hug her. Of course, being in love with someone does that. I knew I had to control myself or risk doing something I might regret afterward. Instead of asking her more questions, I decided to change the subject and talk about my day at work, trying to act as I usually did every weekend. Lily probably didn't realize we were facing a significant issue. Later that night, we were closeness twice, and she behaved like the affectionate wife she always had been on Saturday. We took our daughters to the zoo, had a great family time, and for a brief moment, I forgot about the events of the past week. I didn't bother checking on her at noon for the rest of the week because I intended to follow her on Friday evening after work. On that Friday, when my 2 daughters arrived home at 4:15, I was already there waiting for them. After ordering pizza, I explained that I had to go to the office and would be home later in the evening. They were old enough to take care of themselves, and it didn't bother me to leave them alone in the house as long as they locked the door. I knew they would be in their room by the time I returned. At exactly 5, I got into my car and drove to Lily's workplace. I observed her getting into her car, and as she left the parking lot, she turned away from our home, heading to a pub for her evening out with the girls. I had no trouble following her, as there was a convoy of 6 cars between my SUV and her Toyota, all driving in the same direction towards a pub, watering hole, or a dance hall, whatever you want to call it. 10 minutes later, I saw Lily's Toyota and the other 6 cars entering the parking lot next to a combination bar restaurant called the Glass Shoe. I stayed in my car, parked at the other end when everyone was inside. I got out, walked around the place to learn more about where she was going. The pub was relatively distant from other buildings, surrounded by parking spaces. 2 sides bordered streets, and the other 2 were defined by a well-trimmed, 5-foot-high cedar hedge, in front of which were parking spaces. I noticed the black BMW from the convoy, which Lily had gotten into for the restaurant the previous Friday. It was now parked separately in front of the cedar hedge, away from the other cars. I observed separate sets of doors, one for the restaurant and another for the bar. There were fire doors at the back for both, but those were for emergencies only. Another entrance on the other side, where most cars were parked, also led to the bar. However, Lily's group had entered through the door for the restaurant part of the building. I returned to my car and began changing into clothes I had brought for the occasion. I wore a baseball cap and a black windbreaker. Then I added a pair of glasses to my disguise. Then, to change my facial features somewhat, I inserted a protective denture into my mouth, similar to those worn by boxers. I knew I would have a hard time talking and drinking with this, but I didn't care, since it was not my intention to get into a discussion or get drunk. Looking in the rearview mirror, I knew that no one would recognize me. I waited another hour in my car before entering the bar. The group, including my wife, was seated together near the dance floor, drinking and having fun. Seeing Lily sitting close to the same guy she had gone to eat with the previous Friday saddened and disappointed me. I suspected that something might be going on between them. I picked a table at the back, far from them, to quietly observe. The section where I sat was dimmer. There were a couple of lonely souls, like me, drowning their sorrows. I knew no one would pay attention to me there. Soon the music started, and people moved to the dance floor. I noticed Lily dancing with the guy who sat next to her. The other 3 guys at their table had weird smiles, watching them dance. It was clear Lily and that guy were a couple, catching everyone's attention. After a couple of hours, only Lily, another girl, and 2 men remained. The rest had left. Both couples were on the dance floor, and my wife had her arms around the guy. It was evident they were lovers. He had his hands on Lily's waist, and they barely moved on the dance floor, just standing and rubbing against each other. Then I saw him kiss her and say something in her ear. I watched her nod, and they left the building, holding hands. I followed them. It was already quite dark outside. I saw them walk hand in hand to his car, parked in the last row of the parking lot, near the cedar hedge. He knew they wouldn't be bothered there with no other cars nearby and the hedge at the back. What were they planning? How far would Lily let it go? I needed to find out. Carefully, I walked to the other end of the parking lot, and then toward the cedar hedge. Staying close to the 5-foot-high hedge, I walked toward their car, hiding behind parked cars. Soon, I stood by the back of his BMW. At first, I saw no one inside due to the darkness. As I moved closer, attempting to look inside, the deeply tinted windows revealed nothing, but I heard muffled voices. Feeling desperate, I debated whether to intervene or wait to catch Lily in the act. After a brief moment, the decision was no longer mine. When I noticed the car shaking rhythmically, the guy was fooling around with my wife. I couldn't contain my rage. I yanked the door open, flooding the car with light, revealing my wife, Lily, lying on her back with her lover on top of her, caught red-handed. Having removed my disguise, Lily's eyes met mine, her expression shifting from bliss to shock in seconds. She mumbled an apology, urging me not to act rashly. Then, with urgency, she declared it meant nothing and asked me to wait for her, claiming she was going home. Slamming the door shut, I walked away, heading straight to my car. By the time I left the parking lot, Lily was already halfway to me, shouting for me to wait. Update. Lily arrived home less than 5 minutes after I did, appearing disheveled with messy hair and crumpled clothes. Tearfully, she approached me. She expressed deep remorse, apologizing for hurting me and breaking our marriage vows. Lily claimed that had she known I was being betrayed, she could have engaged in similar indiscretions. Despite her pleas, I felt an unexpected surge of anger. Her apologies continued as she insisted that her actions meant nothing to her, professing love for me and emphasizing the importance of our family. Overwhelmed, she cried, hiding her face and eventually sitting on the couch due to shaky legs. Dismissing her apologies, I asserted that what she did to our marriage was unforgivable and demanded to know the identity of the other person and the duration of their affair. I felt a sense of relief as she moved to the couch, removing her from my immediate presence. The urge to physically react to her betrayal lingered. She revealed the man's identity, someone from her workplace, and pleaded for understanding, claiming the affair should never have occurred. Lily justified her actions by pointing to supposed deception during girls' nights over the past 2 years, but insisted it didn't diminish her love for me. Expressing my inability to live with the public nature of her affair, I highlighted the impact on our reputation among coworkers and at social events. Lily begged for forgiveness, vowing that the betrayal would not recur, and emphasizing the importance of salvaging our marriage and family. While she continued to speak, I stood up, turning away from her. I decided to leave to give myself time to think. I confronted her about destroying our marriage through her initial infidelity. A sudden cry and loud moan caught my attention, prompting me to look back at Lily on the floor, crying in desperation. Despite the overwhelming urge to comfort her, the anger and sense of betrayal made it clear I couldn't trust myself to stay near her. I silently left the house, spending the night in a hotel room without sleep. The next morning, I called my secretary and informed her I wouldn't be going to work for the day. I stayed in my room until noon. After grabbing a quick bite at the hotel restaurant, I passed by my house on the way to the office. There was a green Toyota in the driveway, which I recognized as Francine's, Lily's sister. At least I thought my daughters had their aunt's company along with that of my cheating wife, providing a bit of comfort. What I didn't know then was that Lily was in the hospital. After leaving the house the previous evening, explaining the situation to her sister on the phone, Lily had a breakdown. It was only once I reached my office that I got the news. Francine, Lily's sister, called me, and we had a lengthy conversation. She explained that Lily was emotionally distressed and crying constantly. Less than an hour after I left the house the previous evening, my eldest daughter called Francine, saying Lily was delirious and I was not home. Francine then talked to her sister and promptly called an ambulance when she realized Lily's condition. Francine let me know she was still at my house, taking care of my 2 daughters for a few days. She strongly suggested that I visit my wife at Santa Mary's Hospital in town. After the call ended, I was beyond shocked. Had I been selfish the previous evening? Did I abandon my family when they needed me the most? Maybe. But one thing was clear. If I stayed in the house with her that evening, there was a chance, however small, that I might have become violent due to what she had done. Yes, she wrecked our marriage, but until yesterday, I didn't see myself as someone who avoided problems. Was that exactly what I had done? Lily and I faced a significant problem, undoubtedly. But was that reason enough for me to abandon my family when they needed me? I felt terrible. Sitting behind my desk, I started crying, questioning if there could have been another way, a better way, with forgiveness and maybe reconciliation, a slim possibility. Of course, this mess was Lily's doing. She was entirely responsible for giving another man what should have been mine alone. However, breaking my marriage would hurt my 2 daughters too much. There had to be another solution. That's when I thought of forgiveness with retribution. Once I recovered from the shock of learning about Lily's hospitalization, I got in my car and drove to the hospital. I had no idea what I would say to her, but one thing was certain. I was going to face the situation and find out exactly what she had done.
Now I find myself lying in a hospital bed. A thought crosses my mind, recalling something my mother used to say. Cheaters always face consequences one way or another. Ron and I tied the knot when I was 20, and we were genuinely happy. We had 2 amazing daughters, a lovely home in a great neighborhood, and financial stability. More importantly, I loved my husband, and I knew he loved me back. When my youngest daughter turned 6, I landed a job at a film studio near Ron's workplace. With the fall of the Iron Curtain and the gradual democratization of communism, there was a high demand for U.S. films in Ukraine. Being fluent in Ukrainian and having acting experience from university, I secured a position as a female voice translator for English films, translating them into the Ukrainian language. It was a fantastic job with good pay, and I excelled at it. After 5 years, a new voice translator named Victor Daninko joined us. He was a tall, attractive man in his late 20s with dark blonde hair. Most girls at the studio had a crush on him, but he seemed oblivious to the attention. Vic, born in the US with Ukrainian-speaking grandparents, was perfectly bilingual. We started working together often, and a deep friendship developed between us. That's when my troubles began. Without realizing it, I found myself thinking I was in love with him. Initially, he treated me like the other girls, discussing work matters, and we worked well together. Eventually, he started joining us on alternate Fridays, and our friendship grew into something deeper. We became more than just colleagues. We became good friends. I confided in him about my life, sharing things I had never told my husband, especially when Vic began joining us at the pubs. My first mistake was not telling Ron that our girls' night out was now mixed. I enjoyed Vic's company and didn't want to share his attention with my husband on those nights. Our friendship turned into something deeper, and we found ourselves dancing together frequently. I didn't realize how far things had gone until one evening, while dancing to a slow song, he kissed me passionately. It wasn't a friendly or family kiss. I was shocked. That's how it all started. The following Friday, he found an excuse to take me out of the pub, and we engaged in closeness moments in his car. From there, our passion escalated, and soon we were engaging in more explicit activities in the backseat of his car. Despite feeling guilty when I got home, I made sure to show Ron the love he deserved. However, I failed to realize that Ron, as my husband, deserved my complete love, and I shouldn't have given any of it to Vic. Working with Vic every day made it impossible to keep away from him. Gradually, even at work, we developed the habit of hugging and kissing when no one was around. From my perspective, this behavior with Vic didn't diminish my love for Ron. I still would have given my life for him, and I had no intention of hurting him with my affair with Vic. I was wrong. Making love with Vic wasn't better than making love with my husband. By the time Ron found out about my affair with Vic, we had been lovers for 4 months. While I didn't love Vic like I loved my husband, the physical aspect was fantastic. The freedom I felt with Vic, not having to restrain myself, made all the difference. When making love with my husband, I had to hold back to avoid him thinking less of me. With Vic, I had no such restrictions since I didn't care what he thought about me. This was the main reason I did things with Vic that I had never done with my husband. I think Vic and I were really thoughtless and careless in how we behaved in front of our colleagues. Vic didn't care much since he wasn't married. But because of our public behavior, it was only a matter of time before my husband found out about me and Vic from a jealous coworker. We should have been more discreet. Even if Ron never found out about my affair, I now understand it would still have been terribly wrong. The evening Ron caught us was the worst moment of my life. He yelled at me to go to hell and take my lover with me. Just before he turned to leave the car, I knew my marriage was in deep trouble. I even stepped on Vic in my rush to leave his car and catch up with my husband, but I was too late. By the time I was halfway to his car, he was speeding away, leaving me standing there in the middle of the parking lot. Until then, I considered my love for Ron like a fire, burning only for him, and I knew he felt the same about me. Then one day, when Vic entered my life and kissed me for the first time, it was like a spark from that fire ignited another fire, burning for Vic. These emotions for Vic didn't take anything away from the love I felt for my husband. I convinced myself it was like when my youngest daughter was born. Loving her with all my heart didn't reduce the love I still had for my eldest daughter. It's incredible the things we tell ourselves to justify our basest urges. Children don't expect a parent to love only them, and we never vow to our children to forsake all others. Yes, the love of a parent for a child is far different from the love one should have for their spouse. But I made sure those thoughts never reached my consciousness while I played games with Vic. I know my husband doesn't see it the same way I did then, and I don't blame him. I understand that if the roles were reversed and he had another woman in his life, I would be devastated. Human thoughts and emotions are mysterious, and sometimes we shouldn't try to reason them. So now I'm here in a hospital bed. Each time I wake from my dreamless rest, I start thinking about the events of the last few months. I cry and feel sorry for myself. Then the nurse injects me again with something, and I sleep once more. A wonderful sleep that allows me to forget everything. I wish I could never wake up again and find peace with myself. But each time, just before I pass out, I see a picture of Ron and me on our wedding day. Oh, God help me. My children, my husband, I can't leave them. I must fight the urge to hide on the other side. Life is a never-ending combat. My father once told me, if you stop fighting, then you had no right to be living in the first place. I am alive. Ron and my daughters are alive, and I will live also. After all, they are the loves of my life. Yes, I will fight for my husband and my family. To me, Vic is just dirt now. He had absolutely no right to be in my life in the first place. If Ron allows me, I will be once again and for the rest of my life, the faithful wife I used to be. When I wake up, how long in the future? I don't know. But I will come back into my family's world. Of that, I am certain. When I do, the first thing I hope to see is my husband standing there in front of me so that I can start the difficult task of making it up to him. I don't know how many days I have to stay here in the hospital bed, but I beg everyone to pray for Ron and our daughters.
When I came home from work that evening, my wife greeted me at the door with an unusual excitement in her eyes. Usually, when she had some grand plan or idea, it came up at the last minute. A quick get ready, we're heading out was her usual style. But this time, she seemed different. Before I even had the chance to set my briefcase down, she blurted out, "You're not going to believe what I came across today." Her energy was undeniable, and although I'm not one for surprises, I decided to hear her out. She started talking about this dog exhibition she had seen online. Apparently, it was an open event where anyone could come, walk the dogs, and spend some time with them. I immediately saw where this was heading. She'd been talking about getting a dog for years, and I had managed to hold the line. A dog meant responsibility, work, and disruptions to our neat and orderly home. But there she was, describing this event with the kind of enthusiasm that was hard to ignore. She even added, "And you know what? It's perfect timing because my friend's coming over later tonight with her dog. I'll talk to her about it then." Her friend arrived that evening, her small dog trotting in like it owned the place. They'd always been close, and her friend's opinions carried weight. Naturally, she loved the idea of the exhibition. "It's a great way to meet new people," she said, "and you'll get to see how you feel walking a dog. Oh, and by the way, one of my friends met her boyfriend at one of these events." I raised an eyebrow at that. Met her boyfriend? Or a dog? My question was innocent enough, but the way my wife glanced at me, a mix of amusement and exasperation, made it clear she thought I was missing the point. Her friend laughed and went on about how events like this could be transformative. I couldn't help but think it sounded like a lot of fluff, but I kept my opinions to myself. By the time the conversation shifted back to logistics, they were practically planning the whole weekend around this. My wife's friend was all in, talking about how she'd join us, and it'd be a fun group outing. The enthusiasm was contagious, at least for them. For me, I just nodded along, keeping my thoughts on how much time this would take. I wasn't against dogs, I liked them well enough, but I wasn't thrilled about the sudden shift in plans. My wife, of course, started listing all the potential benefits of going. She was relentless when she had her mind set on something. "It'll be good for us," she said, "to get out, try something different. And who knows? Maybe you'll enjoy it too." I didn't argue. Sometimes it's easier to let her run with her plans and see where things go. Eventually, the discussion came back to me. "So? Are you in?" my wife asked, her eyes full of expectation. Her friend was looking at me too, waiting for my response. I could have protested or laid out my reasons why this might not be the best use of our time. But the truth was, it didn't seem worth the fight. "All right," I said, "if this is what you want, let's do it." That was all the encouragement they needed. Plans were made, times were set, and everyone seemed satisfied. We agreed to head to the exhibition that weekend, all three of us. As for me, I resolved to keep an open mind. It wasn't my first choice of how to spend a Saturday, but sometimes you go along for the ride. The weekend came, and as planned, we got ready and headed out to pick up my wife's friend. She was waiting at her place, dog in tow, looking just as excited as my wife. The atmosphere in the car was light, filled with chatter about how much fun this would be. I focused on driving, keeping my thoughts about how much I disliked these sudden outings to myself. The two women talked non-stop, trading stories about dogs they had seen online and laughing about the antics of her friend's little terrier. I just nodded along where appropriate, staying in my lane, literally and figuratively. When we arrived at the park, it was packed with people and dogs of all sizes. It was chaos, to say the least. Dogs were running around, barking, and their owners were either chatting or chasing after them. My wife and her friend were thrilled. They quickly went to the registration booth and came back with a leash and a small dog. "Look at her! Isn't she adorable?" my wife exclaimed. I nodded, though I didn't really see the big deal. To me, it was just another dog, but they were both over the moon. We started walking through the park, the small dog trotting happily in front of us. The women chatted away, occasionally stopping to pet other dogs or talk to their owners. I kept my distance, watching and keeping an eye on our surroundings. It wasn't my scene, but I had to admit it was interesting to see so many different types of dogs in one place. As we moved along, I noticed how easily my wife got caught up in conversations. She'd talk to anyone with a dog, asking about breeds, behavior, and training tips. I stayed quiet, content to let her enjoy herself. At one point, the dog we were walking suddenly bolted, pulling the leash out of my wife's hand. It darted across a picnic blanket where a young man was sitting, knocking over his coffee in the process. The cup tumbled, spilling its contents all over his lap. My wife gasped and ran over, apologizing profusely. The man waved it off, smiling. "It's fine," he said, "it's just coffee. Besides, it's not your fault, it's the dog's." His relaxed demeanor diffused the situation quickly. Her friend, ever the extrovert, jumped into the conversation. "Why are you here alone?" she asked. The man explained that his friend had planned to come but cancelled at the last minute due to being sick. "So here I am," he said, "just me and the dogs." My wife and her friend, in unison, invited him to join us. I sighed internally, thinking this was the last thing we needed. But there he was, now walking alongside us as if he'd been part of the group all along. As we walked, the conversation naturally turned to him. He introduced himself as a veterinarian who ran his own clinic from home. He specialized in helping animals that had been injured or needed surgery. My wife and her friend were fascinated, peppering him with questions about his work. He handed my wife a business card, mentioning that his clinic was nearby. I stayed quiet, observing him. There was something about the way he looked at my wife and her friend that I didn't like. It wasn't anything overt, but it was enough to put me on edge. The conversation eventually shifted back to dogs. My wife started talking about how much she'd love to have one of her own. "This is fun," she said, "but it's not the same as having a dog at home." The veterinarian chimed in, "Then get one. You'd be a great dog owner." His encouragement seemed to plant a seed in her mind. She turned to me, her eyes searching for approval. I simply nodded, not wanting to make a scene in front of everyone. We wrapped up the day with a coffee stop, sitting at one of the outdoor tables near the park. The conversation continued, with my wife and her friend sharing their dreams of dog ownership while the veterinarian added his professional insights. I mostly listened, contributing only when directly asked. Eventually, the time came to leave. We all said our goodbyes, and I nodded again when my wife looked at me, signaling that we were ready to go. As we got into the car, I couldn't help but feel relieved that the outing was over, even as I wondered what this new fascination with dogs might lead to. When we got back home, my wife was practically glowing with excitement. "That was amazing," she said, still caught up in the buzz of the day. "I can't believe we waited so long to do something like that." I could tell she was already thinking about the next step. It wasn't hard to guess, she wanted a dog, and she wanted one now. I tried to keep her grounded. You realize having a dog isn't just a walk in the park, I said. It's a lot of work. Feeding, walking, training, it's not all fun and games. She waved me off, clearly undeterred. I decided to bring up something that had been bugging me since the park. By the way, did you notice how that guy kept looking at you and your friend? He wasn't just being friendly, he was practically drooling. She rolled her eyes and laughed. You're imagining things, she said. He's a vet. He probably just likes talking about dogs. I wasn't convinced, but I let it slide. There wasn't much point in pushing it further when she was in such a good mood. The conversation shifted quickly. She was already scrolling through her phone, looking up breeders and adoption options. Look at this, she said, showing me pictures of puppies. I've got to admit, they were cute. But cute didn't outweigh practical. Still, by the end of the evening, she had found a breeder nearby with a litter of Dobermans ready for adoption. They're strong, loyal, and intelligent, she said, reading from the ad. Perfect for us. I raised an eyebrow. For you, maybe, I said. Let's see how this plays out. The next day, we drove out to the breeder's place. It was a well-maintained property with large open spaces for the dogs to roam. My wife was practically bouncing with excitement as we walked up to meet the puppies. The breeder introduced us to a sleek, black and tan Doberman. He was a big pup, already showing signs of the size and strength he'd grow into. My wife fell in love instantly. She crouched down to pet him, and he wagged his tail furiously, licking her hand. I could tell the decision was already made. By the time we left, we had everything: the dog, a leash, a crate, and a long list of care instructions. Bringing him home felt like bringing a tornado into the house. The dog had endless energy, sniffing and exploring every corner. My wife couldn't take her eyes off him. She followed him around, making sure he was comfortable and had everything he needed. It was clear she was smitten. I, on the other hand, was still trying to wrap my head around how quickly this had all happened. Over the next few days, my wife's attachment to the dog only grew stronger. She spent every free moment with him, even letting him sleep on the bed. He's part of the family now, she said, as if that explained everything. I wasn't exactly thrilled about sharing the bed, but I let it go. Her happiness was obvious, and I had to admit, the dog was starting to grow on me too. Even though I'd always been more of a cat person, there was something about the Doberman's loyalty and energy that I couldn't ignore. One evening, I walked into the living room and found her on the phone. She was speaking in hushed tones, her back turned to me. "Who are you talking to?" I asked. She turned around, startled. "It's the vet," she said casually. I had a few questions about the dog's diet and care. I frowned. "Isn't that what the internet is for?" She brushed off my comment, saying, "He's an experienced professional. It's better to get advice from someone who knows what they're talking about." I didn't argue further, but it left a sour taste in my mouth. Something about the situation didn't sit right with me. Still, I told myself to let it go for now. She seemed happy, and the dog was settling in well. Maybe it was just my imagination running wild. Either way, I decided to keep an eye on things, just in case. After a few weeks, we started to notice that something was off with our Doberman. He wasn't his usual energetic self, and it became clear that he wasn't feeling well. Normally, he would be bouncing around the house, full of life, but now he spent most of his time lying down, barely moving. When he started vomiting one evening, my wife and I both knew it was time to take action. "We need to get him to a vet," I said immediately, already thinking of a reputable clinic I knew. But before I could finish explaining, my wife cut me off. "We're taking him to the vet we met at the park," she said firmly. Her tone left no room for discussion. "He said Dobermans can have congenital issues, and he's closer. It just makes sense." I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I decided not to argue. The priority was getting the dog help as quickly as possible. Still, it annoyed me that she dismissed my suggestion so quickly without even considering it. We loaded the dog into the car and drove to the vet's clinic. When we arrived, the vet greeted us warmly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was a little too comfortable around my wife. He examined the dog thoroughly, explaining that Dobermans are prone to certain hereditary conditions. After running some tests, he told us it would be best to leave the dog at his clinic for a few days. It'll be easier to monitor him and ensure he gets the care he needs, he said. I wasn't convinced. Is that really necessary? I asked. We can take him home, and you could stop by to check on him if needed. He'd be more comfortable in his own space. Before the vet could respond, my wife interrupted again. If he says it's better for the dog to stay here, then that's what we'll do, she said sharply. Her tone made it clear that the discussion was over. I bit my tongue, deciding to let it go for now, but it didn't sit well with me. We left the clinic with our dog in the vet's care, and the car ride home was anything but pleasant. The tension between us was palpable. Finally, I broke the silence. You're too quick to take everything he says at face value, I said. You don't even question it. It's like you're blindly following him. My wife's response was immediate and heated. What are you talking about? He's a professional. He knows what he's doing. Why do you always have to question everything? The argument escalated from there. She accused me of being difficult and unsupportive, while I pointed out that she was putting too much trust in someone we barely knew. It's not about not trusting him, I said. It's about making sure we're doing what's best for our dog. Blind trust isn't always the answer. She rolled her eyes and turned away, clearly done with the conversation. By the time we got home, the silence between us was deafening. I could see that she was upset, but I didn't know how to fix it. She believed wholeheartedly that she was doing the right thing, and any criticism I offered only made her more defensive. Meanwhile, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about the situation wasn't right. Over the next couple of days, the tension lingered. She made a point of avoiding any discussion about the vet or the dog stay at the clinic. When I tried to bring it up, she shut me down immediately. It was clear she felt attacked, and no matter what I said, she took it as a personal insult. I decided to give her some space, hoping things would calm down on their own. While our Doberman was staying at the clinic, my wife made a point of visiting him every day after work. At first, I thought it was sweet, a testament to how much she cared for the dog. She'd come home and tell me about how he was doing, how he wagged his tail when he saw her, and how the vet was optimistic about his recovery. I didn't think much of it at the time, it all seemed normal, even admirable. But as the days went on, things started to shift. Initially, her visits were brief. She'd leave right after work, spend a little time at the clinic, and come home in time for dinner. But then she started coming home later and later. When I asked why, her explanations became increasingly vague. I was helping the vet, she'd say. There was a dog that needed a catheter, and he asked if I could assist. Another time, it was a sick cat that needed an IV. At first, I brushed it off, thinking she was just being helpful. But the pattern continued, and her excuses started to feel more like stories than genuine reasons. One evening, she came home even later than usual. When I asked what had kept her, she sighed and said, I was just helping out with the animals. The vet was short-staffed, and I couldn't just leave. That's when I finally said something. Since when are you a volunteer? I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. It's one thing to visit our dog, but this is getting out of hand. She immediately bristled, turning defensive. What's your problem? She snapped. I'm just trying to help. Why are you making this a big deal? I didn't back down. It's not about helping, I said. It's about priorities. Our dog is the reason you're there, not every other animal in the clinic. If it's that important, let me go visit him instead. That's when she exploded. You're being ridiculous, she shouted. You're acting like an abuser, trying to control everything I do. With that, she stormed off to the bedroom and slammed the door. I was left standing in the kitchen, stunned by her reaction. The tension lingered for days. She avoided talking to me about the clinic or her visits, and I didn't press her further. I decided it wasn't worth the fight, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Her behavior was too unusual to ignore completely. Still, I resolved to let it go until our dog was back home. At least then, I hoped, things would return to normal. Finally, the day came when we could bring the dog home. The vet assured us that he was recovering well and just needed some rest and care at home. Picking him up felt like a relief, a return to normalcy after weeks of uncertainty. My wife was ecstatic, showering the dog with affection as soon as we got him into the car. For a moment, everything felt right again. The tension between us seemed to melt away, at least temporarily. Back at home, the dog settled in quickly, happy to be back in familiar surroundings. My wife's attention was entirely on him, which suited me just fine. I hoped that with the dog's return, her visits to the clinic would naturally come to an end. But I was wrong. Even with the dog at home, she started finding reasons to go back. The vet needs help, she'd say. They're so short-staffed, and I've already been helping with so much. It'd feel wrong to just stop now. After weeks of tension and suspicion, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My wife's behavior had changed too much to ignore. The late nights, the vague explanations, the defensive outbursts, it all pointed to something she wasn't telling me. I decided it was time to get answers, and the only way I could think to do that was by checking her phone. I knew it wasn't the most honorable approach, but I needed clarity. I waited until she went to bed, pretending to be engrossed in a book until I was sure she was asleep. Once I was confident she was out, I reached for her phone. But when I pressed the screen to unlock it, I was met with a passcode. That was new. She'd never used a password before, and it immediately raised red flags. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. What could the code be? I tried a few obvious guesses, our anniversary, her birthday, but nothing worked. Frustrated, I set the phone back down, realizing I'd need to find another way to figure it out. The next day, I had the house to myself while my wife was at work. I decided to take advantage of the opportunity to search for clues. I started in her office, going through drawers, bookshelves, and anywhere else she might keep something important. After some time, I stumbled upon an old notebook tucked away in the back of a drawer. Flipping through it, I saw pages filled with notes and doodles, some of which looked recent. I studied the entries, hoping to find something that might hint at her phone's password. Despite my effort, none of the numbers or phrases in the notebook worked. Frustrated but not ready to give up, I returned the notebook to its place and kept searching. I moved on to her nightstand, her closet, even the kitchen, but I found nothing that helped. It was starting to feel like a dead end. Part of me wanted to confront her directly, but I knew that would only escalate the situation without giving me any real answers. I needed to be patient and methodical. Later that evening, I noticed her smartwatch lying on the counter. It struck me as an opportunity. If her watch was synced to her phone, it might give me access to the information I needed. I picked it up, swiping through the screens to see if it was locked. To my relief, it wasn't. But I quickly realized it would be too risky to browse through it while she was around. If she caught me, it would lead to a confrontation I wasn't ready for. I came up with a plan. I'd wait for the right moment to temporarily disable the watch. That opportunity came when she went to take a shower. As soon as the water started running, I picked up the watch and lightly bumped it against the corner of the counter, causing the screen to crack slightly. It wasn't a major break, just enough to make it seem like an accident. I set it back down and waited. When she came out of the bathroom, I pointed to the watch and said, "The dog knocked it off the counter. I'm sorry, but it looks like it's broken." She picked it up, inspecting the damage. "Oh, seriously?" she said, clearly annoyed but not overly suspicious. "Don't worry," I added quickly. "I'll take care of it. I'll fix it myself." She seemed satisfied with that and didn't press the issue further. With the watch now in my possession, I had the chance to dig deeper without the risk of immediate detection. It wasn't ideal, and I knew it wouldn't solve all the mysteries, but it was a step forward. For now, I told myself, this would have to do. At least I had bought myself some time to figure out what was really going on. I decided to take the damaged smartwatch to a friend of mine who was good with electronics. I knew he'd be able to fix it quickly and discreetly. On my way there, I tried to keep my mind focused, but the unease in my gut only grew. I hadn't yet found concrete proof of anything, but the secrecy and shifts in behavior from my wife were enough to keep me on edge. When I arrived, my friend took one look at the watch and assured me it wouldn't take long to repair. I left it in his capable hands, thanking him for his help. With the watch temporarily out of the equation, I decided to visit my closest friend. He's the kind of guy who's seen me through thick and thin, and I needed his perspective. When I explained the situation to him, laying out the odd behavior and the tension at home, he listened carefully. "This doesn't sound normal," he said after I finished. "If you're this unsettled, you need to figure out exactly what's going on." By the time I got the watch back from my electronics-savvy friend, I had made up my mind. I synced it to a spare device so I could view its contents without alerting my wife. As soon as I opened the messaging app, my stomach dropped. There was an ongoing thread with the veterinarian. The casual familiarity of their conversation immediately struck me. I started scrolling, reading each message carefully, and the further I went, the worse it got. One message from him read, "Will you be coming by today?" She had replied with a simple yes. Then there was another text, "How is the new command working with the dog?" Her response sent a chill down my spine, perfectly. It's like it's replaced my husband in every way. I had to reread the lines several times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. My hands clenched as I forced myself to keep scrolling. The conversation took an even darker turn. She mentioned wanting something more, something that made my stomach churn. "You wouldn't believe it," she wrote. "I've been thinking about having kids with the dog." I could hardly process what I was reading, and the bile rose in my throat. The vet responded with an invitation, "Come over, and I'll show you how it's done. We can practice one of the most important commands together." My grip on the device tightened as I tried to keep my composure. I showed the messages to my friend, who had been sitting quietly as I scrolled. He read them carefully, his expression hardening with each line. When he was done, he looked at me and said, "She's lost it. You need to get out of this marriage, and fast. This is beyond anything I've ever heard of." Despite my shock, I forced myself to think logically. "I need proof," I said. "If this goes to court, I need something solid to protect myself." My friend nodded in agreement. "You're right. You'll need evidence, not just for her, but for this vet too. He's clearly involved in something deeply wrong." I spent the next few minutes downloading the entire chat thread to my phone, making sure I had copies of every message. It wasn't an easy process, reading through the vile exchanges, but it had to be done. When I was finished, I felt a grim sense of resolution. I didn't know exactly how I would handle this yet, but I had the proof I needed to take the next steps. The first thing I decided to do was focus on the veterinarian. The messages between him and my wife were enough to make my blood boil, but I needed more concrete evidence if I was going to take this further. I remembered that when we had visited his clinic, I'd noticed several cameras both inside and outside the property. It struck me then that these cameras could be recording everything or even streaming in real time. If that was the case, there might be a way to access those recordings and see what was truly going on. I went back through the messages on my phone, looking for anything that might help. Sure enough, one of their chats mentioned the clinic's Wi-Fi password. I noted it down, along with anything else that seemed relevant. I've worked with surveillance systems before, installing cameras and setting up networks, so I knew my way around this kind of technology. It didn't take long for me to identify the camera system he was likely using, based on the equipment I'd seen during our visit. With a clear plan in mind, I did some reconnaissance. I drove past the clinic a few times to get a sense of its layout and the range of the Wi-Fi signal. I parked at a safe distance and ran a few tests to confirm I could connect to the network. Once I was confident I had everything I needed, I headed back home to wait for the right moment to act. Timing was crucial, and I couldn't afford to be careless. The opportunity came soon enough. My wife announced that she was heading out to volunteer again. I told her I needed to take the car to the mechanic and might be home late. She didn't ask too many questions, which was a relief. After she left, I followed her at a safe distance, making sure not to draw any attention. Once she arrived at the clinic and went inside, I parked nearby and connected to the Wi-Fi network. It was time to put my plan into action. Accessing the camera system wasn't difficult. The network was poorly secured, and I quickly gained entry. As I browsed through the live feeds, my worst fears were confirmed. There she was, sitting with the veterinarian, talking and laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. I recorded everything, making sure to capture every interaction. Then, as if that wasn't enough, the conversation shifted to a topic that made my stomach churn, the so-called secret command. She mentioned trying it out soon, adding that I wouldn't be home to interfere. I kept recording, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and disgust. After 15 minutes, she sheathed on me with this guy. After she left the clinic, I stayed behind, watching the live feeds for a little longer. What I saw next was even more damning. The veterinarian's demeanor changed completely once he was alone. He began yelling at the animals in their cages, swearing loudly and slamming his fists on the counters. At one point, he even struck one of the cages, causing the animal inside to cower in fear. It was clear this man had no business working with animals. I made sure to capture every second of his outburst. This footage was more than just leverage against him, it was evidence that could potentially shut down his entire operation. By the time I disconnected from the system and drove away, I had hours of incriminating material saved on my phone. It wasn't just about his involvement with my wife anymore, it was about stopping someone who was clearly a danger to the animals in his care. When I got home, I began reviewing the footage carefully, organizing it into sections and making backups. I wasn't sure yet how I'd use it, but I knew one thing for certain, I wasn't going to let him get away with this. This wasn't just personal anymore. I had a responsibility to make sure he faced consequences for his actions. The next steps were clear. First, I'd deal with him. Then, I'd turn my attention to my wife and figure out how to confront her about everything. After gathering the incriminating evidence against the veterinarian, I parked my car a short distance from my house and approached quietly. I didn't want my wife to know I was home yet. As I entered the house, I moved cautiously, listening for any sounds that might give me an idea of what was happening inside. The house was eerily quiet except for faint noises coming from our bedroom. I crept closer, my heart pounding in my chest, and what I saw left me frozen in place. In the bedroom, my wife was engaged in something very strange with our Doberman. I'll leave it at that, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. I reached for my phone, recording the scene without making a sound. I wanted undeniable proof of what was happening. She was so absorbed in what she was doing that she didn't even notice I was there. I backed out of the room quietly, trying to process what I had just witnessed. A little while later, I stepped back into the room, making my presence known. She jumped, startled, and immediately began crying. "It's not what you think," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. Her hands were shaking, and she couldn't even look me in the eye. I stayed calm, my voice firm but controlled. "If you want to save this marriage," I said, "you're going to tell me exactly what's going on, right now." She hesitated at first, but eventually, she began to talk. Between sobs, she confessed everything. She admitted to having an affair with the veterinarian and went on to reveal something even more shocking: she had developed an obsessive desire to have children with the dog. Her words were disjointed, her reasoning incomprehensible, but there was no mistaking the seriousness of what she was saying. I stood there, stunned, barely able to process the magnitude of her admission. Despite my shock and disgust, I managed to stay composed. "All right," I said, my tone measured. "I forgive you." Her eyes widened in disbelief, but what she didn't know was that I wasn't forgiving her out of compassion. I needed time to act. I had already decided to end this marriage, but I wanted to ensure that I had all my legal and personal bases covered before making a move. Forgiving her, at least on the surface, was the quickest way to de-escalate the situation. Over the next few days, I reached out to a divorce attorney and explained the situation in detail. The attorney was as shocked as I had been but assured me that we could proceed swiftly. Together, we began drafting the divorce papers and discussing potential legal actions against the veterinarian. I also consulted with another professional about how best to handle the disturbing evidence I had collected. By the time the papers were ready, I felt prepared to take the next step. I returned home with the divorce documents in hand. When I handed them to my wife, her reaction was immediate and explosive. She screamed, tore the papers in half, and began throwing anything within reach. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked, her voice filled with rage and desperation. When I didn't react, she turned on me physically, lunging and trying to claw at me. I stepped back, keeping my distance, but it was clear she was completely unhinged. Realizing that the situation had spiraled out of control, I called for an ambulance. I told the dispatcher that my wife was having a severe mental health crisis and needed immediate assistance. Within minutes, the paramedics arrived. She continued to scream and resist as they restrained her gently but firmly. Watching her being taken away, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. It was a tragic end to an already unbearable chapter, but it was necessary. With her now under professional care, I could finally begin to move forward with my life. After my wife was taken away for psychiatric care, I wasted no time in taking control of the situation. It was clear to me that she would eventually return, and when she did, I needed to ensure my safety and peace of mind. The first thing I did was begin gathering her belongings. I went through every room in the house, meticulously searching for anything that belonged to her: clothes, shoes, personal items, and anything else she had brought into our home over the years. Each item went into black garbage bags, one after another. As I packed, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt relief, knowing that I was reclaiming my space, but another part of me couldn't believe it had come to this. Still, I reminded myself that this was necessary. There was no going back after everything that had happened. The relationship was beyond repair, and my focus now was on protecting myself and moving forward. Once her personal belongings were packed, I turned my attention to the more valuable items in the house. I knew that if she returned in a fit of rage, she might target these things. I started with the jewelry, gathering every piece she owned into a small box. Then I moved on to the electronics, laptops, tablets, and anything else she might try to destroy or take out of spite. I carefully packed all of these items and set them aside. The next step was to secure the items I had gathered. I loaded the valuables into my car and drove them to my parents' house. My parents had always been a source of support for me, and I trusted them to keep everything safe. I explained the situation to them briefly, leaving out some of the more sordid details, and they agreed to hold on to the items until the dust settled. Knowing that these things were out of the house gave me a sense of relief. When I returned home, I focused on clearing out the rest of her belongings. There were still smaller, less significant items scattered around the house: cosmetics, trinkets, and random bits of clutter. I didn't want to leave anything behind that could remind me of her or give her an excuse to return. One by one, I filled the remaining garbage bags and stacked them neatly by the door, ready to be taken out when the time came. With her belongings packed and out of the way, I turned my attention to securing the house itself. The locks on the doors were the first priority. I knew she still had a key, and the last thing I wanted was for her to let herself in unannounced. I drove to the hardware store and purchased new locks for every exterior door in the house. It was a small expense, but one that gave me immense peace of mind. Replacing the locks took longer than I expected, but it was worth the effort. As I worked, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. This was my home now, my safe space, and I was taking the necessary steps to protect it. By the time I finished, the doors were secure, and I felt a sense of closure I hadn't felt in weeks. The house finally felt like mine again. Before I called it a day, I moved the garbage bags containing her belongings to the front door. I didn't want them inside any longer than necessary. I left them outside, a clear signal that her chapter in this house was over. With the locks changed and her things packed away, I finally felt like I could breathe. The house was now a place of safety and stability, free from the chaos that had consumed it for far too long. The next step in my plan was dealing with the veterinarian. After everything I had uncovered, there was no question in my mind that this man needed to face justice. I started by reaching out to a lawyer, explaining the situation in detail and providing the evidence I had gathered, including the incriminating footage from the clinic. The lawyer was shocked but assured me that there was a strong case against him. Together, we began drafting the legal documents necessary to bring the matter to court. While the legal process was underway, I decided to take additional action to ensure his behavior didn't go unnoticed. I shared the videos with a few trusted friends and acquaintances, people I knew would understand the gravity of the situation. They were equally appalled and agreed to help spread the word. Soon, the footage was circulating among mutual connections, reaching clients of his clinic and other members of the community. People needed to know the kind of person they were trusting with their pets. Social media became another powerful tool in exposing him. I created a series of posts outlining what I had discovered, accompanied by clips from the videos. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments poured in from people who had previously taken their pets to his clinic, expressing their outrage and disgust. Some even shared their own negative experiences, further solidifying the public's understanding of his character. The pressure was mounting, and it was clear that his reputation was irreparably damaged. In the midst of all this, I took steps to protect our Doberman. Knowing that the vet might try to retaliate or manipulate the situation, I decided to remove the dog from harm's way. I drove him to my parents' house, where he would be safe and well cared for. My parents were happy to help, and the Doberman quickly settled in, enjoying the attention and affection he received. Knowing he was out of the vet's reach gave me peace of mind as I continued to pursue justice. As the case progressed, the police became involved. They reviewed the footage I had provided and conducted their own investigation into the clinic. What they uncovered was far worse than I had initially imagined. The abuse I had recorded was just the tip of the iceberg. The vet had been involved in numerous acts of cruelty and malpractice, some of which were too horrific to detail. The evidence against him piled up, and it was clear that he would face severe consequences for his actions. The trial itself was a sobering experience. Witness after witness came forward, sharing their stories and adding to the mountain of evidence. The videos I had recorded played a central role in the prosecution's case, leaving no doubt about his guilt. The courtroom was filled with people who had been affected by his actions, their collective anger and pain palpable. By the time the verdict was delivered, there was no question that justice had been served. The veterinarian was sentenced to 5 years in prison. It wasn't just for the abuse I had documented, but for a long list of other offenses that came to light during the investigation. The sentence brought a sense of closure, not just for me, but for everyone who had suffered because of his actions. It was a small but significant victory in the fight against animal cruelty. Most importantly, the animals in his care were rescued and relocated to safe environments. Knowing that they were now protected and no longer subjected to his abuse was the ultimate reward. While the path to justice had been long and difficult, the outcome made it all worthwhile. The vet had received his punishment, and the animals were finally safe. After her release from the psychiatric facility, my wife wasted no time stirring up chaos. The first thing she did was head straight for my house. I was at work when it started, but my neighbor called to inform me that she had arrived and was breaking windows. By the time I got there, the scene was one of complete destruction. Every window on the ground floor was shattered, and the front door was hanging off its hinges. As if that wasn't enough, I caught sight of her in the driveway, dousing my car with gasoline. I rushed toward her, yelling for her to stop, but it was too late. She struck a match and threw it onto the car. Flames erupted instantly, and I could feel the heat from where I stood. I grabbed my phone and called the fire department while trying to keep her from doing any more damage. She was yelling incoherently, clearly out of control. By the time the firefighters arrived, she had fled the scene, leaving me to deal with the mess she'd created. As I worked with the firefighters to extinguish the flames, I received another devastating call, this time from my mother. She told me that my wife had gone to their house and set their car on fire as well. "She's completely lost her mind," my mother said, her voice shaking. "We're safe, but the car is destroyed." Hearing this only solidified my resolve to ensure she faced the consequences of her actions. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal preparations and damage control. I worked closely with my lawyer, documenting everything: the destruction at my home, the attack on my car, and the arson at my parents' property. The evidence was overwhelming, and the police were already on the hunt for her. I knew that when they caught her, it would be the end of her rampage. It was just a matter of time. Sure enough, the police apprehended her a few days later near my parents' house. She had returned there, perhaps planning to cause more damage, but they were ready for her. My mother called me as soon as it happened. "They've got her," she said, relief evident in her voice. Knowing she was in custody gave me a sense of closure, but there was still more to do to protect myself and my family from further harm. With her behind bars, I focused on finalizing the divorce. My lawyer worked tirelessly to ensure that the process was swift and thorough. We presented the court with the extensive evidence of her destructive behavior, making it clear that she was a danger not only to me, but to others as well. The court agreed, granting me full protection and control over our shared assets. One of the most satisfying moments came when the court ruled in my favor regarding the division of property. She was stripped of any claim to our house, our savings, and anything else we had shared. Her actions had consequences, and I wasn't about to let her walk away unscathed. The divorce was finalized quickly, and with it came a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. Finally, I decided it was time to start fresh. The house, though now legally mine, carried too many painful memories. I sold it and moved to a new home in a different part of the city, far away from the chaos she had brought into my life. The new house was smaller but felt peaceful and safe. It was exactly what I needed to rebuild and move forward. Looking back, the ordeal had been harrowing, but it was over. She was in prison, where she could no longer hurt anyone, and I had managed to reclaim my life. The road ahead felt promising, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could truly breathe again.
My soon-to-be wife went to meeting up her affair partner in overseas. So I ghosted her, and she lost everything when I kicked her out and karma got to her. Finally stood up for myself, 32 male to fiancé, 30 female. Hey everyone, in short, fiancé had affair starting in July, going on dates, physical affair, even meeting up with affair partner overseas. I was trickled truth and found out the majority in September. She found my old Reddit profile, which has my entire story. I finally did it. And after D-Day, she was lying to me about still seeing affair partner. On Tuesday, her Gmail was up on my computer. I remember seeing a name come across her phone and decided at random to search the name. I found Airbnb receipts, emails, and a folder of photos of them on their dates kissing as recent as last weekend. The visuals flipped a switch. The next night, I sat down with my family and told them everything. I couldn't lie to them anymore. I felt a weight lifted off of my shoulders. My parents were happy. They and my fiancé had a lot of history. I sent her a text to gather her things and please move out to live with her mom. She said it wasn't cool. I flipped a switch and kicked her out. The next night, she stopped by to grab more things. She went through my Apple Watch and found out I told my family. She flipped, threw my clothes outside, saying this is all my fault. Sucked in bed, didn't have sex enough. Let your little form make you believe you were perfect, and if you did everything right, this would have still happened. Now she's texting me. She misses me. Willing to do anything to be together. She doesn't want to move out. Yet one asked, still won't come clean about still seeing affair partner. You had months. You saw me at my worst and kept seeing affair partner. I saved the photos and emails for evidence. Seeing all of it just changed me entirely. It's like my brain won't let me get sad anymore when I have those bad waves. I can't get those pictures out of my head. I feel as if I'm able to finally move on by not having her here. Update. Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving weekend. You can read my posts to discover my story. I finally got the courage to ask my fiancée to leave my house. I recently told my entire family as she is still seeing a fair partner. I came across photos ranging July through November of them together. She came to finish packing, and naturally when I see her, I become short. She asked me to stop being a dick, and I told her I wasn't being a dick, just short. I then went off, not angry, but told her I hope she has found the 20% that I was missing to provide and that it makes her happy. I told her she could not deny how I supported her, provided for her, and was always emotionally there for her. I then left to get a haircut. When I came back, she was in bed crying. As she started to finish packing, she has brought up the following. She asked me if cutting off contact with the fair partner will help chances of getting back together at some point. Edit. She offered to share with me her password to her phone and all social media passwords as well. She still sees a fair partner because she doesn't want to be alone with the pain. She said cheating made her realize all that I did, how I watered our grass, and all she didn't do throughout our relationship. She didn't realize this until she cheated. Doesn't want to be with the fair partner. She wants to be with a person who stuck with her through thick and thin. Didn't want to tell me how much in a dark place she was in after being laid off because she knew how many extra hours I was working and didn't want to stress me more. At first, I thought to myself, man, she is manipulative. Her telling me her move-in date for her new apartment is this weekend did make me upset. Thinking to myself, though, I just can't go back to her after all she has put me through. Why wasn't she just honest from the beginning? How to translate the above? I was thinking to myself, is this just love bombing? Have my therapist appointment this week, but just wanted to touch base here for some thoughts. Thank you in advance. Let's see what those thoughts are. First, from Steph's wife. I skimmed over your other posts. Here's the deal. She FD up. I wanted her cake and to eat it too. And when confronted about the affair, she continued it. It sounds as if it was a pretty extensive affair also. I think it is finally hitting home for her that her backup plan is gone. She wanted her fun and you to fall back on. You supported her, right? Well, who's going to do that now? I think the scope of what she did is hitting her. Too bad for her. Where were her tears when you were falling apart because of what she's done? She got angry when you finally told your family? Nah. When she deserved to have her infidelities hidden away and swept under the rug. She needs to be accountable to all the people that she hurt directly and indirectly. Without that accountability, there is zero chance of reconciliation. From what you've commented, it doesn't sound like she's really genuinely sorry, except this last time, because it's coming to a close for her. Her safety net has told her to F off. The time for cutting off contact with the fair partner has passed. Too little, too late. Doesn't want to be with the fair partner? Since when? Sure, she wanted to be with him during the whole duration of her affair. The lack of communication about her being in a dark place and not wanting to stress you more is a way for her to put just a little bit of the blame on you and off of herself. Don't let her do that. Her anger at you and disrespect is crappy. You made her dirty secrets public, and in turn, she tried to make you hurt by saying awful stuff to you. Is that really someone you want to spend the rest of your life with? You came to the public forum with your questions problems because we have all been there. We all have similar stories and are able to recognize all the shady things our significant others say and do while engaging in emotional affairs or physical affairs. It helps to get advice from people who are either going through or have gone through what you yourself are going through right now. Please pay attention to her actions and not her words. Words are cheap and mean nothing when not backed by action. Stay strong. Update. Now the guilty mind games? Happy New Year, everyone. It seems now the guilt is too strong and wayward partner, 9 years together, has been calling me late at night, sometimes crying, telling me she will do anything to get back together. Late night texts, asking if I miss her. She tells me she'd royally messed up and her holidays were ruined. I feel as if her calls, texts are all about herself, never about how am I doing, and very self-absorbed. I need to keep contact open due to the dog. Christmas Eve, she sent me a picture of us during Christmas our first year together, as a reminder of the good times we had and at some point in the future if we can still talk, even if it's once in a while since we had good times together. They got me very upset, and I told her to please do not send me any pictures to me. She didn't think of my feelings and how I would take it. She still doesn't know that I know all of the details and still lies about specifics with the fair of partner, such as her still seeing him after D-Day. Is this just guilt? Mind games? Emotional abuse? Holidays were hard, but anytime I got upset, I reminded myself of the photos, receipts, etc. that I found. Do I miss her? Of course. But the thoughts go away once I look at those photos. 3 months of therapy really helped. My therapist had me graduate last week and feels I made the right choice. I actually set up some online dating, 3 months since D-Day, this weekend, and supposed to see someone for coffee next weekend. Talking to other girls felt good. While I made it clear I have no expectations. Not sure if I'm totally ready, but why not step outside comfort zone? Not on topic, but thoughts if I should still go? Hope everyone hung in there during the holidays. Update. I feel like I should be upset at myself. D-Day was in September. Had her move out in November when I came across hard evidence. Broken no contact with my ex tonight. I had 2 missed calls. Even when I saw them, I said no, out loud. Yet, a few minutes later, I gave her a call. I don't know why I did. She started off by saying how much she missed me and took me for granted. She then changed the conversation on my mistakes. 1. Not setting boundaries with my parents, which I can agree with, but we went to couples counseling together on how best to address it, and I eventually put the work in. Which at the time, she told me how much the relationship with her and my parents improved. And 2. Not opening up more regarding sex. Our quantity was a problem, although she agreed I came up with multiple solutions that she never took me up on for an extended period of time. I.e. planning sex would be great for a week or so, and then she or we wouldn't continue the commitment. She said if she didn't have the affair, she would happily be with me, and that she had the affair because, with her self-worth tied to external things, losing her job sent her to a really dark place where she felt worthless. She said only now that she has lost everything that she realized how much I meant to her and how much she had. Why did she call? Is this just manipulation? Is her guilt? To feel she still has some control over me. That's how I feel, and I'm pissed I fell into it. I think I realized why I answered because I honestly want to make sure she is physically and mentally okay. I'm very understanding and empathic. She's not a bad person, just made her series of really bad intentional choices. Honestly, before she called, I was searching for why I felt sorry for her, knowing she feels terrible about what she did. To this point, I've been doing fine. Do I think about the past of times? Sure, and sometimes have a good cry, but have felt indifferent about it all. I guess this is just part of my healing journey. I've been talking to a girl via mutual friends that are supposed to meet soon, which I'm excited about, but just pissed at myself right now. Update. How much deterioration leads to cheating? Post-separation. Hey everyone. Hope you are all staying strong. It has been a couple months since I have posted. What I will note to anyone struggling is that 100% gets better. Trust the advice you receive here. Something that I've been going back and forth on is how much of the deterioration of the relationship is the reason for the cheating. I don't blame myself for the cheating, but I can understand taking some blame for issues in the relationship. When it is acceptable, if ever, to know the issues in the relationship and understand why behind the behaviors of the wayward partner. My therapist, whom I only see once a month now, told me when we first met a while ago that even if I did everything right in my relationship, we would still have head problems, and my wayward partner made a decision to look elsewhere, not because I was unfulfilling. Part of me is now 50-50 with that mindset. At the time, my wayward partner noted it was a feeling of being wanted that she felt led to her acting out. Sometimes, I think if I made her feel more wanted, desired, etc., maybe that would have changed the route she took. Over time, she realized it was not dealing with losing her job and fighting whatever demons she had going on due to job loss. Just something going back and forth during my bad moments. Onward. Last update. Karma. Right feeling? I wanted to post an update since a lot of you have helped me in the last 6 months. For those who don't know, my ex-fiancée, 31 female, 9 years together, had an emotional affair, physical affair, starting late spring 2022, lasting beyond D-Day, September 2022, and through us breaking up, November 2022. It all started when she lost her job. Spiral then sought external validation with an affair partner she met at a career event. Drickle Truth blamed me up until I told her to move out. I've been no contact for 3 months. Ignoring all the regretful texts, she now sends at random until she called texting me multiple times yesterday. She told me she just lost her new job, almost exactly a year after when she lost her last job and began her affair. She called to grab the rest of her stuff that she wants to sell. She told me she began working at a restaurant to make ends meet. Maybe I deserved this. None of this is your worries. While crying on the phone, told her the days she can grab her stuff that's in the garage. Not sure she is still with the fair partner. Last I know they were together in February. Just come full circle. On the phone last night, I felt very indifferent, stoic. Oddly, I don't feel happy satisfied that this happened to her as some might imagine I would be after all that happened. I don't wish anyone to be in that position. After the call, I sat for a minute and felt bad that it happened. She has made a lot of mistakes in the past here and now at this. For her sake, I hope she finds a way back to virtue that I believe she does have. Followed to move on with the rest of my night. As for me, work, being in the gym and dating has been keeping me busy. I can't stress enough what exercising has done, and once you are ready to start dating again, dating has helped me realize I'm not the only one, and I'm having fun with the process. Cheers for me now are holidays. I really enjoyed having everyone together for the holidays in the past and at random. Fleeting thoughts, but I'm in a good place. If anyone needs anything, DM me and hopefully I can help. To our amazing Cheating Tales Lab family, welcome and thank you for joining us. Your support means the world. Quick question. Where are you listening from today? Which city? Which country? Drop it below. Now, let's dive into today's story. The autumn sun cast long shadows through the bay windows of Howard Graves' home office as he reviewed the quarterly reports from his investment firm. The markets had been volatile, but his company had outperformed expectations yet again. His fingers drummed absently against the mahogany desk, a wedding gift from his wife Stacy 13 years ago. The doorbell's chime broke his concentration. Howard glanced at his watch. 6:45 p.m. He wasn't expecting anyone, and Stacy was upstairs getting ready for their weekly date night. The kids were at their after-school activities, the twins at baseball practice and Sarah at her piano lesson. Rising from his desk, Howard straightened his charcoal suit jacket. At 45, he maintained the same disciplined physique that had earned him a wrestling scholarship to Yale. The morning runs and evening workouts weren't just about health, they were about control, about maintaining the edge that had helped him build his firm from nothing. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. Coming, Howard called out, his deep voice echoing through the foyer. Through the frosted glass panels flanking the front door, he could make out multiple silhouettes. Opening the door, he found himself face to face with his younger brother Eric, flanked by two men in expensive suits that screamed, "Corporate lawyer, Eric?" Howard's initial smile faded as he noticed his brother's expression, cold, calculated, with a hint of something that looked disturbingly like triumph. "What's this about?" Eric, 3 years Howard's junior, had always been the more conventionally handsome of the two. Where Howard was solid and strong, Eric was lean and sharp, with the kind of looks that open doors in the finance world. But right now, those good looks were twisted into something ugly. "Hello, brother." Eric's voice carried a note of malice that Howard had never heard before. "May we come in? We have some family matters to discuss." Howard stepped aside, his instinct screaming that something was very wrong. The lawyers moved with practiced efficiency, their Italian leather shoes clicking against the hardwood floors as they entered his home. "Your wife," Eric announced, turning to face Howard with a smirk, "promised me a wild night 13 years ago." He paused, savoring the moment like a predator toying with its prey. "And she delivered. Multiple times over the years, actually." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Howard's mind refused to process them for a moment, but Eric wasn't finished. "You see, big brother, while you were building your perfect little life, playing house with my leftovers, I was fucking your wife. And not just once or twice, we've been at it for years. Since before you even married her." One of the lawyers stepped forward, extending a thick manila envelope. "Mr. Graves, these documents require your immediate attention." Howard took the envelope, his movements mechanical. Inside, he found a DNA report. His eyes scanned the document, each word a hammer blow to his world. Probability of paternity, combined paternity index, prior probability. The conclusions were highlighted in yellow. For Jason Graves, age 13, alleged father Eric Graves, Probability of paternity, 99.99%. 4 James Graves, age 13, alleged father Eric Graves. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. 4 Sarah Graves, age 10, alleged father Eric Graves. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. No, Howard whispered, then louder, no. This is impossible. Oh, it's very possible. A familiar voice called from the top of the stairs. Howard turned to see Stacy standing there in her silk robe, her blonde hair falling perfectly around her shoulders. She'd always known how to make an entrance. He's right, Howard, she continued, descending the stairs with deliberate steps. Her voice carried no trace of remorse, only a cold satisfaction. I've been lying for years. The kids, the marriage, all of it one big, beautiful lie. She reached the bottom of the stairs and walked over to Eric, sliding her arm through his with practiced familiarity. I only married you for your money, Howard. Eric's always been better. In every way that matters. She smiled, a predatory thing that transformed her beautiful face into something cruel. Bigger bank account, bigger ambitions, and well, bigger in other ways too. Howard's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. Get out, he growled, his voice low and dangerous. Both of you, get out of my house. The second lawyer cleared his throat. About that, Mr. Graves. He produced another envelope. This is an eviction notice. The house, being in both your and Mrs. Graves' names due to marriage laws, is being contested. Additionally, my clients have filed motions to freeze your assets pending investigation of alleged financial misconduct. Howard's mind raced. The house he remembered now. 3 years ago, Stacy had convinced him to put it in both their names. For tax purposes, she'd said, and because it shows how much you trust me. You can't do this, Howard said, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. We already have, Eric gloated. You see, brother, while you were playing family man, Stacy and I were planning. Every trust fund you set up for the kids, every document where you claimed paternity, every financial decision you made thinking you were protecting your family, we documented all of it. Stacy moved to the living room, picking up a framed family photo from the mantel. You should see your face right now, Howard. Did you really think someone like me would be satisfied with someone like you? Eric and I have been laughing about it for years, how you never questioned why the kids look so much like him, how you never noticed our business lunches, how blind you were to everything. Get out of our house, loser, she smirked, dropping the photo. The frame shattered on the hardwood floor, spiderweb cracks spreading across the glass like the fractures in Howard's world. Mr. Graves, the first lawyer spoke again. We'll need your preliminary response to these filings within 48 hours. Mrs. Graves will be seeking full custody of the children, substantial alimony, and compensation for 13 years of fraudulent paternity claims. Howard stood perfectly still, his mind already shifting from shock to calculation. Years of business negotiations had taught him to think clearly even in crisis. You've made one crucial mistake, he said quietly. Eric laughed. Oh, and what's that, big brother? You thought you could break me. Howard's voice was ice cold. You thought 13 years of lies would shatter me. But you forgot something important about me, little brother. I don't break. I don't bend. And I never, ever lose. Big words from a man who's about to lose everything, Stacy sneered. The kids aren't yours, the house isn't yours, and soon, half your company won't be yours either. Howard's phone buzzed a text from the Twins baseball coach. Practice ending early due to rain. They'd be home in 20 minutes. The children will be home soon, Howard announced, his tone businesslike. I suggest you all leave before they arrive. We wouldn't want them to see their mother and biological father for what they really are. Not yet, anyway. Are you threatening us? Eric stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. Threatening you? Howard's laugh was devoid of humor. No, Eric. A threat implies uncertainty. I'm making you a promise. You want to play games? Fine. But remember, you chose this battlefield, not me. And unlike you, I don't need to hide behind lawyers and lies to win. We have DNA proof, Stacy spat. We have documentation. We have everything we need to destroy you. What you have, Howard replied calmly, is an impressive collection of evidence proving you've committed multiple felonies. But please, continue explaining your master plan. I'm sure the prosecutors will find it fascinating. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Eric's face, but he covered it quickly with another sneer. Come on, Stacy. Let's leave Howard to pack his things. He'll be needing a much smaller place soon. As they moved toward the door, Howard called out, Eric? His brother turned. Remember when we were kids, and you stole my baseball card collection? Remember what happened after that? Eric's face paled slightly. As children, Howard had spent 6 months systematically dismantling everything Eric cared about: his friendships, his reputation at school, his prized possessions, until Eric finally returned the cards, completely broken. You're not kids anymore, Stacy said, but her voice wavered slightly. No, Howard agreed. We're not. And this time, you've taken something far more precious than baseball cards. He smiled, and both Eric and Stacy took an involuntary step back. I'll be keeping the house, by the way. You might want to have your lawyers review the actual property documents. The ones in the safe, not the copies you've been working with. What do you mean? Eric demanded. Leave, Howard said simply. Before the children get home, we can discuss the rest through proper channels. He turned to the lawyers. Gentlemen, I'll have my legal team contact you tomorrow. I suggest you review your client's evidence very carefully before proceeding. Knowingly submitting fraudulent documents to the court is a serious offense. After they left, Howard stood in the foyer, looking at the shattered family photo on the floor. He pulled out his phone and made 3 calls, one to his lawyer, one to his sister Kelly, and one to a private investigator he'd worked with before. The sound of rain outside grew stronger, and Howard could hear the twins' carpool pulling into the driveway. He took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and prepared to protect his children from the storm that was coming. They were his kids, regardless of DNA, and he would make sure they survived this with as little trauma as possible. As he opened the door to greet Jason and James, Howard allowed himself a small, grim smile. Eric and Stacy thought they'd won with their dramatic reveal, but they'd forgotten the most important lesson Howard had learned in business. The person who throws the first punch rarely wins the fight. The real battle was just beginning. The key card clicked as Howard entered his temporary residence at the Madison Apartments. The 1-bedroom unit was a far cry from his 5-bedroom colonial, but it served its purpose. He'd chosen it specifically for its proximity to both his office and the children's schools. Setting his briefcase on the modest dining table, Howard loosened his tie and pulled out his phone. 3 weeks had passed since Eric and Stacy's dramatic revelation, and he'd spent every moment since then methodically preparing his counterattack. Marcus? It's Howard Graves. Remember that favor you owe me from the Peterson audit? He paused, listening to the forensic accountant's response. I need your expertise. Off the books. Marcus Finley's gravelly voice came through the speaker. The Peterson case saved my career, Howard. Name the time and place. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. The Capitol Grill. Private booth. Howard's tone left no room for negotiation. Bring your best equipment. We're going hunting. The next morning, Marcus arrived carrying a sleek laptop bag and the world-weary expression of someone who'd seen too many financial crimes to be shocked anymore. At 60, with steel-gray hair and reading glasses perpetually perched on his nose, he looked more like a kindly grandfather than one of the most feared forensic accountants in the business. So, Marcus said after their coffee arrived, tell me what we're looking for. Howard slid a USB drive across the table. Everything. Bank records, property transfers, communication patterns. My wife and brother have been playing a long game. I need to know how long and how deep it goes. Marcus plugged in the drive, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Your wife, Stacy. She had access to your home office? Yes. And my phone, computer, everything. Howard's jaw tightened. I trusted her completely. That's usually how it starts, Marcus muttered, his eyes scanning data streams. Then he stopped, frowning. Howard, look at this. The screen showed a pattern of recordings, hundreds of them, all carefully labeled and dated. She's been recording your business calls, Marcus explained. High-quality audio files, stored on a secure cloud server. And look at the access logs. They're being downloaded regularly from an IP address registered to Eric's brokerage firm, Howard finished, his voice cold. Over the next 2 hours, they uncovered the extent of the surveillance. Stacy hadn't just been recording calls, she'd photographed documents, copied emails, and maintained detailed notes about Howard's business strategies and client meetings. This isn't just about the affair or the kids, Marcus concluded, pushing back from his laptop. They've been using your business intelligence for insider trading. Eric's trading patterns match perfectly with your firm's major moves. Every time you made a significant investment decision, he was one step ahead, Howard nodded. Give me everything. Every trade, every recording, every document access. Marcus hesitated. Howard, this is bigger than forensic accounting. You need someone who can dig deeper into their personal lives. Someone who can... Already on it. Howard pulled out his phone and dialed another number. Alberto?
It's time.
Alberto Barrera had been a homicide detective before moving into private investigation. He'd helped Howard vet potential business partners over the years, and his reputation for discretion was legendary. They met that afternoon in a small coffee shop in Georgetown. Your brother's done this before, Alberto announced without preamble, sliding a thick folder across the table. 2 other families, similar pattern. Married women, wealthy husbands, kids involved. He and the wives would plan it for years, gathering evidence, setting up the perfect trap. Howard opened the folder, studying the photographs and reports. Why didn't they press charges? Pride. Shame. And Eric was careful. He made sure the husbands had something to lose if everything came to light. One guy had been skimming corporate accounts. Another had an illegal offshore betting operation. Alberto leaned forward. But you? Your records are clean. That's probably why they needed so much time to set this up. Get me everything on the other families, Howard instructed. And I mean everything. School records for the kids, medical histories, financial statements. If Eric so much as jaywalked near their homes, I want to know about it. As Alberto left, Howard's phone buzzed. A text from his sister Kelly. The kids miss you. Sarah asked about you at piano practice today. His fingers hovered over the phone. The hardest part of all this was maintaining distance from the children while he built his case. But he couldn't risk Stacy using their interactions against him in court. Instead of responding, he made another call. Renee? I need your expertise. Renee Foster had been Howard's head of cybersecurity for 5 years. She arrived at his apartment that evening, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, carrying a laptop that could probably hack the Pentagon. I ran deep scans on both their email histories, she reported, setting up her equipment. It goes back 15 years, Howard. They started planning this before you even met Stacy. Show me. The emails were damning. Eric and Stacy had met at a finance conference in Chicago. They'd started their affair immediately, but it wasn't just about sex. They'd strategized, planned, documented everything. Look at this email from 15 years ago. Renee pointed to the screen. Target acquired. He's perfect, rich, trusting, and too focused on work to notice anything suspicious. That's from Stacy to Eric. 3 days after she met you. Howard's expression remained neutral, but his hands clenched under the table. The twins' conception wasn't an accident either. Renee continued, pulling up more emails. They planned it specifically to ensure maximum emotional impact. They knew having Eric's children would give them leverage over both your emotions and your finances. The children's sports activities, Howard mused. They used those as cover for their meetings? Renee nodded, typing rapidly. Encrypted messages hidden in routine emails about baseball practice and piano lessons. They were careful, but they got sloppy toward the end. Started using their phones for direct communication. I've recovered some deleted texts. She pulled up a series of messages that made Howard's blood boil. Eric. He actually thinks they're his kids. What a fool. Stacy. Playing happy family with him makes me sick. But it'll be worth it when we take everything. Eric. Just a few more months. Then we destroy him completely. There's more, Renee said quietly. They've been using the children's trust funds as collateral for loans. High-risk investments in Eric's name. If those investments had failed, the kids would have lost everything, Howard finished. Forward all of this to Franklin Novak. My lawyer needs to see it immediately. The next morning, Howard met with Franklin in his office. The attorney had aged well over 30 years of practice, his silver hair and Brooks Brothers suits projecting an image of trustworthy authority. "This is unprecedented," Franklin said, reviewing the evidence. "The insider trading alone is enough for federal charges. But when you add the fraud, the embezzlement through falsified invoices that Renee uncovered, Howard, they're looking at serious prison time." "Good," Howard replied, "but I want this done right. No mistakes, no loopholes, no chance for them to slip away." Franklin nodded, making notes. "We'll need to coordinate with the SEC for the insider trading charges. The FBI will want to look at the fraud aspects. And the district attorney's office will be very interested in the pattern of behavior with those other families. How long to build an airtight case? A month, maybe 2. We need to be thorough. They'll fight back hard when they realize what's coming." Franklin looked up from his notes. "What about the children?" Howard's face softened slightly. "They stay protected. Whatever happens, their trust funds remain untouched. I want them taken care of, regardless of DNA. And Stacy's claims about paternity fraud? Let her make them," Howard said coldly. "Every time she claims I'm not their father, she'll be admitting to insurance fraud. She listed me as the father on every policy, every school document, every medical form. Let her try to explain that to a federal judge." As Howard left Franklin's office, his phone buzzed again. A text from Stacy. "The kids keep asking about you. Getting harder to explain why Daddy abandoned them. Ready to negotiate yet?" Howard didn't respond, but he smiled. Let them think they were winning. Let them believe their plan was working perfectly. The time would come soon enough when they'd realize just how badly they'd underestimated him. That evening, he met with his entire team: Marcus, Alberto, Renee, and Franklin in a private room at the Capitol Grill. The evidence was spread across the table like pieces of a complex puzzle. "One last thing," Alberto said, pulling out a final report. "I found something interesting about Eric's brokerage license. There are some irregularities in his initial application. If we pull that thread—" "Do it," Howard ordered. "Pull every thread. Check every document. I want no surprises when we move." Marcus raised his glass. "To justice?" Howard shook his head. "To patience. And to making sure they never hurt another family again." As his team discussed strategy, Howard's mind drifted to the children. Jason's baseball games, James's science projects, Sarah's piano recitals. DNA didn't matter. They were his kids, and he would make sure they had a future free from their mother's manipulations and their biological father's schemes. The next morning, Howard received a call from his building's security. Eric had tried to gain access to his office, claiming he needed to discuss family matters. "Your brother left a message," his secretary reported. "He says you're only hurting yourself by dragging this out. He and Stacy are willing to be generous if you cooperate." Howard's response was simple. "Tell him my lawyers will be in touch. Let them think he was beaten. Let them believe their plan was flawless." Howard Graves had learned long ago that the best revenge wasn't served cold, it was served with precision, patience, and absolute certainty. As he reviewed the mounting evidence with his team, Howard remembered something his father had told him years ago. "In business and in life, son, never throw the first punch. But when you hit back, make sure they stay down." Eric and Stacy had thrown their punch. Now Howard was methodically assembling the evidence that would not just knock them down, but destroy everything they'd built through lies and manipulation. The investigation continued, each day bringing new revelations of their deception. Howard maintained his distance from the children, though it pained him. Better a few months of confusion than a lifetime of watching their mother and biological father manipulate them for financial gain. As Alberto dug deeper into Eric's past, more victims emerged. Women who'd been used as pawns in previous schemes, business partners who'd been betrayed, families that had been torn apart. None had fought back effectively, but their stories added weight to the growing case. "Your brother's gotten bolder over the years," Alberto reported during their weekly update. "The patterns are consistent, but the scale keeps increasing. You're his biggest target yet." And his last, Howard replied firmly. Renee's cyber investigation revealed more layers of deception. Stacy had been systematically copying and forwarding business documents for years, using a sophisticated system of hidden email accounts and encrypted messages. She didn't just record your calls, Renee explained, showing him the data trails. She installed keyloggers on your devices, copied entire hard drives, even photographed documents in your briefcase while you slept. Marcus's financial analysis painted a picture of long-term planning and calculated deception. They've been moving money through a series of shell companies, he reported, preparing for this moment for years. But they made mistakes, got careless with the documentation. Franklin worked tirelessly to organize the evidence into a cohesive legal strategy. We're not just building a defense against their claims, he explained. We're constructing a comprehensive criminal case. When we move, they won't know what hit them. Howard maintained his outward appearance of a man under siege. He let Eric and Stacy see him looking tired at school events, appeared distracted at business meetings, gave them just enough signs of breaking to feed their confidence. Inside his temporary apartment, however, he worked with cold precision, organizing the evidence that would ensure their destruction. The walls were covered with timelines, financial records, and surveillance photos. Every piece of information was another nail in their coffin. As the investigation phase neared its end, Howard received one final piece of evidence from Alberto, a recording of Eric and Stacy discussing their plans at what they thought was a secure location. Howard's always been weak, Eric's voice dripped with contempt. All that talk about family and trust. Pathetic. He made it so easy, Stacy laughed. Playing devoted husband and father while we built the trap. I almost feel sorry for him. No, you don't, Eric replied. You're right, Stacy agreed. I don't. When this is over, we'll have everything: the money, the house, the kids as leverage. And Howard? He'll have nothing. Just like he deserves. Howard listened to the recording twice, his expression unchanging. Then he made one final call to Franklin. Are we ready? Everything's in place, Franklin confirmed. The SEC is prepared to move on the insider trading. The FBI has enough evidence for multiple fraud charges. And the district attorney is very interested in the pattern of behavior with the other families. Good, Howard said quietly. Then it's time to let them think they've won. The pieces were in place. The evidence was secured. Now it was time for the final phase of Howard's response to their betrayal. Eric and Stacy thought they'd orchestrated the perfect plan to destroy him. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Howard sat in his small apartment, surrounded by stacks of financial documents. His signature, freshly dried, marked the bottom of each page. To anyone watching, it appeared he was surrendering everything he'd built. Are you certain about this strategy? Franklin Novak asked, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. Once we start this play, there's no going back. They expect me to fight the eviction, Howard replied, his voice steady. They're prepared for a legal battle over the house and assets. What they're not prepared for is total capitulation. Franklin gathered the signed documents into his briefcase. The meeting to finalize the asset transfer is scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eric and Stacy's lawyers confirmed their attendance. And our other guests? The SEC agents will be in position. FBI too. The district attorney's office is coordinating with both agencies. Franklin paused. You know they'll try to hurt you through the children one last time. Howard's expression hardened. The kids are staying with Kelly this week. Stacy agreed, thinking it would give her time to clear out my things from the house. A cold smile crossed his face. She always underestimated my relationship with my sister. The next morning, Howard dressed with particular care: charcoal suit, white shirt, blue tie. The same outfit he'd worn the day Eric and Stacy had arrived with their revelation. He wanted them to remember this. The conference room at Franklin's law firm filled slowly. Eric and Stacy arrived first, both wearing expressions of barely concealed triumph. Stacy had dressed expensively, no doubt using the credit cards she thought Howard couldn't track. Eric wore his usual banker's armor bespoke suit, gold watch, shark smile. Brother, Eric nodded mockingly. Ready to sign everything away? Howard didn't respond, taking his seat silently. Their lawyers spread documents across the mahogany table, pointing out signature lines with efficient precision. Before we begin, Franklin announced, there are some additional parties who need to be present for this transaction. The conference room door opened. 3 men and a woman entered, their expressions professionally neutral. "What is this?" Stacy demanded. "Allow me to introduce Special Agent Carter from the SEC," Franklin said calmly, "along with Special Agent Rodriguez from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and Assistant District Attorney Chun." Eric's smile faltered. "This is a private family matter. These people have no business." "Oh, but they do," Howard spoke for the first time. "You see, this isn't just about a house or some bank accounts. This is about 15 years of fraud, insider trading, and criminal conspiracy." The color drained from Stacy's face. "You're bluffing. You have nothing." Howard nodded to Franklin, who opened his laptop. The large screen on the conference room wall flickered to life, displaying emails, financial records, and surveillance photos. "Nothing?" Howard's voice was ice. "Let's start with the insider trading. Every major trade you made, Eric, perfectly timed with information Stacy stole from my office. Hundreds of recorded calls, thousands of photographed documents. You can't prove," Eric began. "Then there's the insurance fraud," Howard continued as if Eric hadn't spoken. "Every medical form, every school document, every insurance policy where Stacy listed me as the father while knowing I wasn't. That's federal fraud, by the way. For each document." Stacy's lawyer leaned over to whisper urgently in her ear. She shoved him away. "The embezzlement through falsified invoices was clever," Howard acknowledged. "Having shell companies bill my firm for non-existent services, then routing the money through offshore accounts. But you got sloppy with the paperwork." Eric stood abruptly. "This meeting is over. We're leaving." "Sit down, Mr. Graves," Special Agent Rodriguez said quietly. "The only place you're going is our field office." "You planned this," Stacy hissed at Howard. "All of it. The quiet surrender. Signing over the assets. It was a trap. Like the trap you and Eric planned for 15 years? Howard's voice remained calm. "The one where you married me for my money, had my brother's children, and documented everything so you could destroy me?" The evidence continued to scroll across the screen. Bank statements showing money laundering, encrypted messages planning the deception, DNA tests proving the calculated nature of the children's conception. "But the most damning evidence," Howard concluded, "comes from your other victims." Eric's head snapped up. "What other victims?" The screen showed photographs of other families, other homes, other lives destroyed. "You've done this before, brother. But your previous targets were too ashamed to fight back, too worried about their reputations. I'm not." Special Agent Carter stepped forward. "Mr. Graves, Eric Graves, you're under arrest for multiple counts of securities fraud, insider trading, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Mrs. Graves, you're under arrest for wire fraud, insurance fraud, and embezzlement." "You can't do this," Stacy screamed as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "Those are my children. You can't take my children." "They were never just bargaining chips," Howard said quietly. "They're children who deserve better than parents who saw them as weapons in a financial scheme." As Eric and Stacy were led away, Howard remained seated, watching them go. Franklin dismissed their shocked lawyers, who practically ran from the room. "The press will have this within the hour," Franklin warned. "Good." Howard stood, straightening his tie. "Let everyone see what they really are." The next few weeks passed in a blur of headlines and legal proceedings. Brothers' betrayal leads to major financial crimes bust splashed across every financial paper. Eric's previous victims came forward, emboldened by Howard's stand. The evidence was overwhelming. The hardest part was explaining everything to the children. Howard arranged for family counseling with a child psychologist who specialized in parental betrayal cases. The initial sessions were brutal. "So you're not really our dad?" Jason had asked, his 13-year-old face struggling to remain stoic. "Biology doesn't make a father," Howard replied firmly. "Love does. And I have loved you, all of you, since the day you were born. That will never change." The twins processed the news differently. James threw himself into his science projects, while Jason quit baseball, unable to face the memories of how his mother and biological father had used the sport to cover their meetings. Sarah, at 10, simply asked if she could still call Howard Daddy. His heart broke and mended in the same moment. Kelly proved invaluable during this time. The children stayed with her while Howard dealt with the legal aftermath, providing them stability and a safe space to process their emotions. They're strong kids, Kelly assured him over coffee one morning. They get that from you, not their biology. The federal trials moved quickly, the evidence too overwhelming for any real defense. Eric's lawyer attempted to paint him as a victim of Stacy's manipulation, while her lawyer tried the opposite approach. Neither strategy worked. Howard attended each day of the trials, sitting silently in the back of the courtroom. He wanted them to see him, to know he was watching their downfall. Both Eric and Stacy attempted to contact him through their lawyers, offering deals and threatening to reveal embarrassing personal details. Let them, Howard told Franklin. I have nothing to hide. They're the ones who built their lives on lies. The convictions, when they came, were comprehensive. Eric lost everything: his freedom, his brokerage license, his reputation. The judge was particularly harsh, noting the pattern of destruction across multiple families. Stacy, facing 15 years in federal prison, finally showed emotion during her sentencing. Please, she begged the judge. My children need their mother. You should have thought about that, the judge replied coldly, before you used them as pawns in your scheme. 5 years passed. Howard rebuilt his life, focusing on his children and his business. The house that Eric and Stacy had tried to steal became a home again, filled with new memories that slowly buried the painful ones. The children, supported by therapy and Howard's unwavering love, began to heal. They chose to keep the Graves surname, a decision that meant more to Howard than any financial victory. Blood doesn't make a family, James announced one evening over dinner, now 18 and preparing for college. Actions do. Jason, having found a new passion in photography, nodded in agreement. Besides, who wants to be associated with those two? Sarah, now 15 and still playing piano, had perhaps the simplest take. You're our dad. Period. Both Eric and Stacy attempted to contact the children from prison. Their letters went unopened, their calls unanswered. The children had made their choice, choosing the father who loved them over the parents who had seen them as tools for revenge. Howard's revenge hadn't just been about punishment, it had been about justice, about protecting not only his family but preventing Eric and Stacy from destroying other lives. In the end, blood had proved thinner than water, but integrity had proved stronger than both. The final piece of mail Howard received about the case was a notice that Eric and Stacy had been denied their appeals. He filed it away without comment, then went to watch Sarah's piano recital, where she played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata flawlessly. Looking at his daughter on stage, Howard knew he'd won more than just a legal victory. He protected the only thing that truly mattered: his family's future. Eric and Stacy had tried to use love as a weapon, but they'd never understood that real love, like real strength, couldn't be faked or manipulated. It was this understanding that made Howard not just a victor, but a father. And in the end, that was the only title that mattered. Epilogue. 10 years after the verdict. The visiting room at the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut, remained as austere as it had been for the past decade. Stacy Graves, now showing strands of gray in her once perfect blonde hair, sat alone at a metal table. The guard had informed her 30 minutes ago that her children wouldn't be coming again. She'd been sending monthly visitation requests for 10 years, and for 10 years, they'd been declined. Her prison uniform hung loose on her frame, a far cry from the designer clothes she'd worn during the trial. The other inmates called her the schemer not for her crimes, but for her endless plots to regain contact with her children, all of which failed. 3 cells down, a letter lay crumpled in her trash bin. Dear Ms. Graves, we represent James, Jason, and Sarah Graves. This is our final notice requesting that you cease attempting to contact our clients through any means, including but not limited to letters, phone calls, or visitation requests. Any further attempts will result in legal action. Respectfully, Morton and Associate. At the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, Eric Graves faced his own daily humiliations. His prison job in the laundry facility was a far cry from his corner office at the brokerage firm. His cellmate, ironically, was another financial fraudster who'd once sought Eric's investment advice. Eric had tried writing a memoir titled Brother versus Brother, the truth behind the headlines, but every publisher rejected it. The rejection letters all carried the same message. Howard's story was already public record, documented in court transcripts and investigative journalism pieces. Nobody wanted Eric's self-serving version of events. Meanwhile, in Greenwich, Connecticut, Howard Graves' life had taken a markedly different path. The old colonial house, once a battlefield in Eric and Stacy's scheme, had become a true family home. Howard had considered selling it after the trial but decided against it. Instead, he'd renovated it completely, erasing the physical remnants of betrayal while preserving the good memories his children had grown up with. On this particular Sunday evening, the house was alive with celebration. Sarah, now 20, was home from Juilliard for the weekend, preparing for her first major piano recital at Carnegie Hall. The twins, at 23, had both graduated college, James with a degree in biomedical engineering from MIT, and Jason with a degree in investigative journalism from Columbia. "Dad," Sarah called from the kitchen, where she was helping prepare dinner. Jason's latest article just went viral. Howard looked up from his tablet, pride evident in his expression. After the scandal, Jason had channeled his anger into investigating financial crimes. His recent Expose series, Patterns of Betrayal, Financial Predators in American Families, had earned him consideration for a Pulitzer. 3 million views and counting, Jason reported, his old baseball trophies long since replaced by journalism awards. The best part? Someone recognized Uncle Eric's methodology in another case. The FBI's reopening investigations from 20 years ago. James, setting the table, shared his own news. "The patent for my medical device authentication system just got approved. No one will be able to forge medical records the way Mom did. Not with this in place." Howard watched his children in every way that mattered and marveled at how they transformed their pain into purpose. The DNA results that Eric and Stacy had wielded as a weapon had become meaningless in the face of real family bonds. Kelly arrived for dinner with her husband Tom, carrying her famous apple pie. Her role during the crisis years had earned her a permanent place in their Sunday family dinners. She'd recently retired from her position as a victim advocate, her experience with her own family having led her to help others navigate similar betrayals. "Did you see the latest appeal was denied?" Kelly asked Howard quietly while the kids were distracted. Howard nodded. Eric had tried claiming ineffective counsel, but the courts had rejected it outright. His former lawyer had provided documentation of Eric rejecting plea deals that would have reduced his sentence. "Franklin called," Howard replied. "Stacy's trying to get early release again. Medical issues, apparently. Real ones this time? Does it matter?" The conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Alberto Barrera, the private investigator who'd helped expose Eric's previous victims, had arrived with his wife Maria. After the case, he'd become a close family friend, often consulting with Jason on investigative pieces. "Marcus sends his regards," Alberto announced, hanging up his coat. "He's in Singapore, teaching forensic accounting. Uses your case as a primary example." Renee Foster arrived next, now running her own cybersecurity firm. She'd partnered with James on his medical authentication system, ensuring it was hack-proof. The success of the Graves case had established her reputation in the field. As they gathered around the dining table, Howard looked at the extended family he'd built from the ashes of betrayal. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on everything from Sarah's upcoming recital to Jason's investigations to James's innovations. The topic eventually turned to recent news about Eric and Stacy, as it sometimes did during these gatherings. "Mom's latest letter arrived yesterday," Sarah mentioned, her tone matter-of-fact. "I returned it unopened, like always." "She tried adding me on LinkedIn," James added with a dry laugh. "From a prison computer program account. Claimed she wanted to support my career development." "Uncle Eric's more creative," Jason contributed. "He attempted to contact me through a prison ministry program, claiming he'd found God and wanted to make amends. My editor got a good laugh out of that one." Howard listened to his children discuss their biological parents with a detachment that had taken years of therapy to achieve. The betrayal had left scars, but they'd healed stronger. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the kids had retired to their old rooms, Howard sat in his study. The wall that had once held family photos now displayed his children's achievements, Sarah's concert programs, Jason's published articles, James's patents. Mixed among them were the legal documents that had ended Eric and Stacy's scheme, preserved as reminders of justice served. His phone buzzed with a text from Franklin Novak, who'd recently become a federal judge. Thought you should know. Eric's trying to publish a book again. Publishers still aren't interested. Some stories only work when truth wins. Howard smiled, remembering the day 10 years ago when truth had indeed won. The evidence had been irrefutable, the justice swift. Eric had lost everything: his freedom, his licenses, his reputation. His attempt to paint himself as a victim of Stacy's manipulation had backfired spectacularly when evidence emerged of his previous schemes. Stacy's fall had been equally complete. The woman who had once prided herself on manipulating men now spent her days in prison counseling sessions, mandatory programs designed to address her sociopathic tendencies. Her therapist reports, which Franklin occasionally shared, suggested she still blamed everyone but herself for her situation. The financial penalties had been severe. Every asset Eric and Stacy had accumulated through their schemes had been confiscated. The restitution orders would ensure that even after their release, they would never regain their former lifestyle. Their attempts at early release had been consistently denied, their appeals rejected. The pattern of deception revealed during the trial had convinced every judge that they remained a threat to society. Howard's own life had flourished in ways Eric and Stacy couldn't have predicted. His investment firm had grown stronger, his reputation for integrity attracting clients who valued honest financial management. He'd established a foundation that helped victims of financial fraud, providing resources and legal support to families targeted by schemes similar to Eric's. The children had exceeded everyone's expectations. They'd taken the pain of betrayal and transformed it into driving forces for positive change. Jason's journalism exposed financial predators, James's innovations protected medical records, and Sarah's music touched hearts while helping fund art therapy programs for traumatized children. Their decisions to keep the Graves surname had been made independently, each child choosing Howard's legacy over their biological parents' shame. They'd even legally changed their middle names, removing any connection to Eric and Stacy's families. The extended family that had formed during the crisis remained close. Kelly's role as aunt had expanded to include mentor and confidant. Alberto's investigative skills had guided Jason's career choice. Renee's technical expertise had influenced James's path in medical security. Even Marcus, though often abroad, maintained regular contact through video calls, sharing his expertise with the next generation of forensic accountants. Franklin's rise to the federal bench had been partially influenced by his handling of the case. His thorough prosecution had set new precedents for dealing with long-term financial fraud schemes. The story had become a cautionary tale in legal and financial circles. Harvard Business School had created a case study based on it, examining how trusted insiders could exploit family businesses. Jason had guest lectured there, providing first-hand insight into the human cost of such betrayals. Eric and Stacy's other victims had found closure through the trial. Several had formed a support group, which Howard's foundation now funded. Their stories had helped change laws regarding financial fraud within families, establishing stronger protections for victims. Howard's phone buzzed again, a group text from his children. Sarah, Carnegie Hall rehearsal tomorrow. Dad, front row seat still has your name on it. Jason, breaking news can wait. Wouldn't miss it. James, bringing the prototype for the new security system. Install teams ready for next week. Howard smiled, remembering Eric's words from 10 years ago. Blood is thicker than water. His brother had been wrong about that, just as he'd been wrong about everything else. It wasn't blood that made a family, it was love, trust, and integrity. The moon cast shadows through the study window, reminding Howard of countless nights spent building the case that had brought justice. But justice hadn't just been about punishment. It had been about protection, protecting his children, protecting other potential victims, protecting the very idea of what family should mean. Eric and Stacy had tried to destroy his family with lies, manipulation, and betrayal. Instead, they'd inadvertently strengthened it, forging bonds that no DNA test could ever break. Their scheme had failed not just legally, but fundamentally they'd never understood that real family transcended biology. As Howard prepared for bed, he paused to straighten a family photo on the wall, a recent one, showing him with his children at James's graduation. Their smiles were genuine, their bond unshakable. In the end, that was his true victory. Not the legal triumph, not the financial recovery, but the family that had emerged stronger from the crucible of betrayal. Tomorrow, he would sit in Carnegie Hall, watching his daughter play Beethoven. His sons would be there, their own achievements adding harmony to their sister's music. And somewhere in prison cells in Connecticut and Brooklyn, Eric and Stacy would continue serving their sentences, learning the hardest lesson of all. Betrayal's price is paid not just in years, but in the love and trust forever lost. The house settled into its nighttime quiet, a home where truth had defeated deception, where integrity had overcome betrayal, where love had proven stronger than blood. Howard Graves slept soundly, knowing that his family chosen by love, rather than defined by genetics, was flourishing in ways Eric and Stacy could never comprehend. In the end, they had tried to break him with a DNA test, never understanding that fatherhood was measured not in chromosomes, but in love, protection, and unwavering support. That was a lesson Howard had known all along, one his children had learned through his actions rather than his words, and one that would continue to guide their family long after Eric and Stacy's names had faded from memory.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
The internet changed how we lived. Suddenly, everyone wanted a computer, including my family. We finally got one a couple of years back. Initially, it was a novelty. My wife used it for email and games, while the kids used it for homework and gaming. I browsed the web and watched adult content. I often worked late, leaving the factory at midnight. Unlike many guys, I headed straight home. Alone in the quiet house, I'd sit at the computer. Eventually, I got bored and started reading stories online. I became intrigued by tales of infidelity. These stories made me suspicious of my wife. I started scrutinizing her behavior, even arguing with her. Despite her reassurances, I couldn't shake my doubts. I read less over time, but the thoughts lingered. I even wondered about my own reactions if I caught her cheating. Would it turn me on? Discussing this with Deb only led to more questions. Our relationship had begun innocently enough, but doubts crept in. Deb's sister Sandy had a reputation for promiscuity. Though I'd been wild in my youth too, Sandy's behavior was on another level. Her carnal exploits were well known, including involvement in ménage à trois. I knew Bob from work. He was a day shift supervisor who got transferred. He invited me to his wedding with Sandy, who was just as wild as him. I wasn't fond of Bob because of his behavior towards Deb. Despite Deb's reassurances, I made it clear I'd protect her from him. We agreed to keep our past relationships private due to jealousy. Our conflicting work schedules strained our marriage. I didn't want to encounter someone Deb had slept with, nor did I want to admit I'd been with her sister when our kids were young. Despite our differences, we managed to get along, though we didn't see each other much. Deb asked me to fix Sandy's leaking sink, knowing Bob was useless with repairs. I promised to take care of it on my way to work. While I worked, thoughts of Sandy's lifestyle as a possible wanton lingered, fueled by Bob's revelations. Despite Sandy's advances, I joked to keep things light. She didn't tempt me enough to risk my marriage. Arriving at Sandy's house, she greeted me provocatively. As I fixed the clog caused by eggshells and potato peels, Sandy hovered nearby, emphasizing her availability. "What are you doing, Sandy?" "I want you." "Stop it, Sandy. I'm trying to finish this job." She paused briefly, allowing me to complete the task. When I stood up, she persisted. "Are you going to sleep with me now?" "No, Sandy, I can't do that. Deb is your sister and I love her. I won't cheat on her, especially not with her sister." "Have you forgotten how it was in high school? Are you too good to sleep with me now?" "Sandy, please, I love Deb." "She doesn't know about our past together unless you tell her. You're a beautiful woman." "But I love Deb." "You foolish man. Either you'll sleep with me or I'll tell Deb you did it anyway. She'll believe me. After all, I'm her sister." "Why are you doing this? Why hurt us? Deb is your sister and she loves you." Sandy laughed. "My innocent sister thinks she's perfect. Let's see how she reacts when I spill the truth." "Sandy, don't do this. I won't have lovemaking with you. And I'll tell Deb about our past in school. I know she'll understand." Grabbing my tools, I declared I was finished with her sink. I left in my truck, my mind racing. Would Sandy lie to Deb? At work, I tried calling Deb, but she wasn't home.
I left a message, expressing my love and the need to talk about her sister. The day dragged on, with my thoughts consumed by the impending conversation. By evening, I called home again, but no one answered. Deb had left with Sandy and Bob, leaving the kids with me. I decided to keep them overnight. "Is something wrong, Ray?" asked Deb's mom. "No, it's okay. If you see her, tell her I love her and I'll see her tonight. I have to get back to work." For me, it was one of the longest nights. I knew I had to confess about Sandy before I met Deb. Finally, my workday ended, and I headed home, bracing myself for the inevitable conversation. Pulling up to the house, I noticed Sandy's car parked in the driveway, signaling an imminent confrontation. Unlocking the door, I was met with a shocking sight. My wife, Deb, Bob, and Sandy in compromising positions. Anger surged through me as chaos erupted. Waking up in the hospital, I found Patrolman Gene Andrews by my side, explaining the events that had led to my injury. Confusion clouded my mind as I tried to make sense of the situation. "I see you're conscious now. I'm Patrolman Gene Andrews. Where am I? And where's my wife? What happened?" "Take it easy, Mr. Harper. You have a concussion from a blow to the head with a glass vase. There was a fight at your home, and though charges were initially considered, they've been dropped. You're lucky. It could have meant 18 months in jail. What about the attack on me?" "Witnesses say you were in a scuffle with your brother-in-law when his wife intervened, hitting you with the vase to stop the fight. It was a single blow to halt the altercation. You should be grateful the charges were dismissed." "Where was my wife during all this?" "When we arrived, she was ill from excessive drinking, according to your sister-in-law. You became upset with her, leading to a confrontation with your son-in-law who was trying to protect her. Your wife doesn't recall much, only that there was shouting. If the charges are dropped, why are you here?" "My supervisor called when you weren't home yet and instructed me to wait for your statement." "So, what happened?" "I have nothing to say. I wasn't going to broadcast that I found my wife with another man. I just lay there and said nothing." "Okay, it's your call. The doctor says you'll need to stay until tomorrow. Consider yourself fortunate no charges were pressed. You're lucky, Mr. Harper." The officer departed, leaving me with a pounding headache. What now? I couldn't bear the thought of living with a cheating wife, but I needed answers. I phoned my sister to pick me up the next day. I couldn't rely on Debbie, not after this. As I waited for Amy to arrive, the phone rang. It was Deb. "Should I come get you? We need to talk now that we're square." "Square? What are you talking about? You cheated with Bob and you think we're even. Amy's on her way. I just want to grab my things and go." "What do you mean, leave? I was just evening the score for what you did," Deb retorted. "I'm not discussing this over the phone. Amy and I will come to pick up my things, and we can talk then." I hung up and waited for Amy. She arrived shortly, and we drove to my house. I asked her to wait in the car to avoid any conflict. Knocking on the door, Deb answered. I inquired about the kids, and she mentioned they were at her mom's. Beginning the conversation, I addressed her response to my message. "Did you listen to my voicemail?" "Yes." "Sandy claimed you coerced her into having lovemaking. How could you?" "I didn't do that. That's why I left the message. I went to fix her plumbing and she made advances. I refused, but she persisted, threatening to lie to you about us." "I don't believe you. She wouldn't lie to me. She's envious of our marriage and wanted to break us apart. Letting Bob sleep with you was part of their swinging lifestyle. They got what they wanted and our marriage suffered." "No, that's false. I did it for revenge. You assaulted my sister, so I slept with Bob to even the score." "Sandy even knew physical engaging details about you, like your uncircumcised state and the mole on your upper thigh. Your sister is promiscuous." "She knew because I was involved with her in high school, like many others. I kept it from you because I liked you and didn't want to jeopardize our relationship. Then you said we should bury our past. I'm unsure what to believe. Sandy is my sister, and you're my husband. Instead of asking me, you let Bob..." "Did you really think raping your sister would fix things? You must have wanted him badly to believe them. But Sandy's claims..." "I don't care what your sister says. It's not just about Bob, it's about you not trusting me enough to discuss the accusations. If I had assaulted her, why didn't she report it?" "She didn't want to cause a family scandal, but she had no qualms about involving the police last night." "She didn't cry maltreatment because it didn't happen. You can believe whoever, but this marriage is over. Why would you want to be with a rapist?" "No, you desired Bob and used me as an excuse. That's not true. I love you." "Look up, love. It doesn't involve sleeping with others." I'll grab my things now and see you next week for the rest. I'm consulting a lawyer Monday to start the divorce process. Ray, hold on. This isn't how it was planned. Sandy said she forgave you and you'd forgive me. I only wanted revenge. No, you slept with Bob. And your sister. I grabbed my suitcase, packing a few things. What about the kids? Tell them what you want. I'm done with this. I'll arrange visits through a lawyer and Amy can help with the kids. I don't want to speak to you again. I left. Amy drove me to a budget motel. On the way, I told her everything. She knew I was truthful. Weeks passed. It was tough. I worked extra for expenses, found a cheap place and ate out mostly. In the divorce, assets split equally. Child support didn't bother me. I love my kids. I miss Debbie, but know it's over. Attended school events, avoiding Debbie's family, saw my kids weekly. Deb called often. I listened about kids, but hung up when she brought up us. Visited Amy's for dinner and played with kids. Sandy stuck to her story, leaving Deb torn. I had no proof. It was my word against Sandy's. Deb believed her, which hurt the most. One afternoon, the school called saying Kyle wasn't well. I fetched him and found he had a cold. I informed Debbie, who taught middle school, and she said she'd come home soon. After checking Kyle's temperature, which was slightly elevated, I waited with him. An hour later, Debbie arrived. As she went to check on Kyle, the phone rang. Without thinking, I answered. It was Sandy. "What are you doing there?" she asked. "Well, look who's calling the shots. Kyle was sick, so I brought him home. Thanks for ruining our marriage." I recorded the conversation, forgetting the answering machine was on. "Is he okay?" "Why do you care? You're the reason his parents split." "Ray, things got out of hand. You knew we were wantons, and Bob wanted your wife. If you had just slept with me, none of this would have happened. But instead, you came home and started a fight. You accused me of maltreatment and made Bob assault Deb. What kind of sister are you?" "Bob didn't force her. She willingly slept with him, and she'd probably do it again. She was drunk, and you filled her head with lies, then watched your husband violate her. Ray, you can't prove anything. I warned you Deb would believe me. If you need action, call me. Tell Deb to ring me later. Hope Kyle feels better." She hung up and I turned off the recorder. Debbie asked who called, and I told her it was Sandy. "Your angel sister, who never lies to you," I replied. "What did she want?" I recorded her message. She said to call her back. "See you in court Thursday." "I guess it's our Freedom Day. Don't forget to listen to the message," I said, heading to my truck. My phone rang persistently on the way home, about 10 times. When I finally answered, it was Debbie apologizing, claiming Sandy told her the truth about not being maltreatmented. "Good to know, but it doesn't change my mind. You slept with Bob without giving me a chance to explain. Despite telling you the truth, you chose your sister's tale, thinking I was a rapist. I loved you, maybe always will, but I also hate you for what you did to our family and the distrust you had for me." On Thursday, I took 2 days off work, signed the divorce petition at my attorney's office, and left before Deb arrived. Depressed, I went to the neighborhood bar where I saw Bob. Without hesitation, I punched him repeatedly until I was pulled away by others. Dragged off by the police, I was taken to jail. I made one call, reaching out to my sister Amy. I confessed my actions and insisted she shouldn't post bail. I'd face my sentence. Tears flowed when we hung up. Debbie tried to visit me in prison, but I declined to see her. Nearly 2 months later, my case went to court. I pleaded guilty to assault and received a 2-year sentence, minus time served. Amy stored my belongings, informing me that Debbie was unwell and wished to see me. I refused. Deb truly loves you. Her family is furious about Sandy's accusations. Also, Debbie never showed up to sign the divorce papers. So legally, you're still married, Amy informed me. Prison life was harsh, fights were routine, and I had to earn respect. My cellmate, Keeler, was a lifer with a violent past. Despite our rough start, he eventually opened up to me. Then, surprisingly, Debbie visited me one day. "What brings you here?" I questioned, feigning anger, though she looked lovely and tender. "Ray, I still love you. I've made mistakes," she confessed, offering me photos of our kids, tears streaming down her face. "I've moved on. Take care of our kids," I replied, receiving the pictures. "I didn't finalize the divorce. I'll wait for you no matter how long," she pleaded. I felt torn. Despite her mistakes, I still loved her. Leaving her by the window, I walked back to my cell. In the kitchen, I overheard plans to confront Keeler. Without being a snitch, I informed him, hoping to save a life. The next day, unsure if Keeler believed me, I stood my ground. He assured me he'd handle it discreetly, earning my gratitude. He He concealed 2 books under his shirt, shielding his kidneys. Across from him, 3 allies sat at a nearby table. As the attacker approached and lunged with a knife, Keeler remained composed. The blade struck the books, its dullness preventing penetration. Keeler's comrades subdued the assailant until guards intervened. The attacker was isolated, while Keeler resumed his meal unfazed. It was astonishing how Keeler remained composed. He confided in me regularly after the incident. Despite his tough exterior, he was a different person behind bars. Keeler inquired about my family, sharing his own story of estrangement. His daughter Angie remained loyal, though he protected her from prison life. He cherished her deeply, proud of her career as a lawyer. I recounted my ordeal with Sandy and Debbie to Keeler. "Do you still love her?" he asked. "Yes, but I can't forgive her," I replied. Keeler urged me not to hold on to grudges, sharing his own regrets. His words left me pondering my future upon release. Without a job or family, what would I do? The following month, Debbie visited me again, her eyes teary but smiling. She handed me drawings from the kids, portraying us as a family. "They miss you, Ray, and I miss you terribly. Can you forgive me? Can we rebuild our family?" "I've cut ties with Sandy and Bob. I regret not trusting you," I confessed. Doubt lingered. Would she believe me if faced with accusations again? "Deb, I want to forgive you, but it's hard. Seeing you with Bob is etched in my mind. Did you have feelings for him?" "No, I despised it. I felt sick when you walked in. I regret my actions deeply. I only want you, Ray, the father of our children," she pleaded. Weeks later, Amy visited with unsettling news. "I saw Sandy and Bob together at the house. I don't know why. I thought you should know." Confusion swirled. Had Deb lied again? I was ready to forgive, but now doubted her honesty. I needed to understand why Deb was reconnecting with Susan and Bob. A month later, Keeler and I spoke, and he expressed gratitude for my past help. He, a former lawyer, offered to leverage his connections to potentially secure my release from parole. Though uncertain, I trusted him. Keeler's integrity stood firm, despite his criminal background. I respected his stature and refrained from probing further, choosing to accept his word. A few weeks later, I was summoned to the warden's office for the parole board meeting. The prison governor was the first to address me. "Mr. Harper, we have a parole application for you. After reviewing your file, we noted your initial struggle to adjust. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir. I found prison life challenging, but I tried to adapt." "If released earlier, where would you have lived and worked?" I had to think quickly, realizing the importance of my response. "Well, sir, my sister and her husband offered me a place to stay, and my previous employer expressed willingness to rehire me." "Aren't you married, Mr. Harper?" "Yes, sir, but we were in the process of divorce when I was sentenced. I'm uncertain about our future." "We appreciate your candor. We knew about your marital status and wanted to gauge your honesty." "Regarding recidivism, we're cautious about early releases. I assure you, I'm committed to staying out of prison." "Return to your cell, Mr. Harper. We'll notify you of our decision by month end." "Thank you, sir, for considering my parole." Back in the cell, Keeler inquired about the meeting. I shared my responses and asked if he had any involvement. "You never know, but if you're released early, I'll expect a weekly box of cigarettes on my account," he chuckled. A few days later, Debbie returned, mentioning a parole board representative had visited. "Are you getting paroled?" she inquired anxiously. "What did they say?" he nervously questioned. "They asked about our living arrangements, and if you'll be staying here," she replied, adding, "I'd love to have you back." Changing the subject, he queried about her interactions with Sandy and Bob. "She's my sister. I don't see her much," she responded defensively. "And Bob?" he pressed. "Why all the questions?" she retorted, visibly uneasy. "You promised not to see Sandy, yet they were here together. Did something happen with Bob again? Tell him when I'm out, I'll settle things. And if you're having fun with him in the meantime, I'll deal with it," he asserted. Deb hastily exited the room, confirming his suspicions. He phoned his sister Amy, informing her of the encounter, and she assured him of her support. "Did the parole board contact Mr. Parker about my job?" he inquired. "Yes, they did. He said you could return. You were one of his top employees," she reassured. "You've given me hope," he acknowledged gratefully. "They mentioned you're likely to be released next month. Considering you have a place to live and a job," she added tearfully. Amy's words buoyed his spirits. I received a call informing me of my upcoming release next week. They provided the name of the lawyer handling my case and instructed me to report to the agency promptly after my release. It puzzled me why I had to meet with a lawyer instead of a parole officer. However, I learned that the law firm facilitated my release, handling paperwork, explaining my parole terms, and arranging a meeting with a parole officer. I expressed gratitude to Keeler, remembering our agreement about the cigarettes. Regardless of his involvement in my parole, the prospect of freedom was worth a weekly box of cigarettes. As I stepped outside the gate, my sister Amy awaited me tearfully. We shared a hug and a brotherly kiss. Inside Amy's house, her husband welcomed me warmly. Amy mentioned that Debbie, after consulting with a lawyer while I was incarcerated, had initiated the divorce proceedings. It seemed my suspicions about Deb were confirmed. Yet now, I was a free man. Knowing I needed to arrange visitation with my kids, I called Deb's house beforehand to ensure she was available. I clarified that I sought no trouble and suggested we discuss arrangements on her porch. Reluctantly, she agreed, warning of involving the police if there was any disturbance. As I arrived at the house, my children rushed to me, shouting, "Daddy! Daddy! You're back!" I embraced them tightly, feeling the depth of my longing for them. After a brief chat, I urged them to ride their bikes, recalling how their mother and I used to watch them from the porch. "Debbie, these kids are mine too. I want to be a part of their lives," I asserted, frustrated by her dismissive attitude. "I was willing to forgive you, but you went back to Bob and Sandy. I won't tolerate exposing my children to their lifestyle," I warned sternly, emphasizing the seriousness of my intent. Debbie insisted she wouldn't subject the kids to that lifestyle and claimed she had changed. "Actions speak louder than words," I reminded her skeptically. After bidding my kids farewell, I discussed their well-being and promised to spend more time with them once I found a nearby apartment. As I left, a sense of unease settled over me, knowing I needed legal guidance in this complex situation. I hadn't spoken to the lawyer who secured my parole. Approaching the receptionist, I presented the card from the parole board. "May I see Mr. A.J. Brady, please? I have an appointment. I'm Ray Harper," I stated. The receptionist assured me Brady would see me shortly and directed me to take a seat. While waiting, I wondered if she had said Miss Brady. The card indicated A.J. Brady, so I assumed it was a man. Lost in thought, I was taken aback when a stunning woman in a dark blue suit approached. She greeted me with a smile, dimples, and shoulder-length dark hair. As she extended her hand for a handshake, she introduced herself as A.J. Brady. "Ray Harper, I presume," she said. "I've been asked to review your case. From what I've gathered, you didn't receive fair representation. Let's discuss further in my office," she added, instructing the receptionist to hold calls. "Yes, Miss Brady," the receptionist responded. I followed her into her office. If she had asked, I would have followed her anywhere. She was strikingly beautiful. "Well, Mr. Harper, we finally meet," she said. "Please call me Ray," I replied gratefully. "I owe you my life, but I'm curious, why me?" "A friend of mine asked me to look into your case," she explained. "Your lawyer failed to mention key details like your recent divorce and extenuating circumstances. I presented these to the parole board, who agreed your sentence was excessive." "Why me, Miss Brady? Who hired you? Can I call you AJ?" I inquired. "Look, Ray, a friend asked for my help and I delivered. Knowing who hired me isn't crucial. And yes, you can call me AJ," she replied. "There are some things we need to discuss." "Would you join me for lunch?" I asked. "I don't usually meet clients outside the office," she replied. "It's not a date, just lunch," I clarified. "All right, Ray, let's call it a business meeting over lunch," she agreed, flashing a smile. "I'll let Mary know we're leaving, and then we can go." I watched her rise. She exuded a rare blend of charm and professionalism for a lawyer. We dined at a tranquil restaurant. Over lunch, she briefed me on meeting my parole officer, regular visits, adherence to rules, and staying clear of trouble. "Angie, share something about yourself," I requested. "Ray, discussing my personal life with a client wouldn't be appropriate," she responded. "Your smile is captivating," I complimented, prompting her blush. "Tell me about your legal background," I persisted. She revealed her scholarship-acquired law degree and experience in criminal law. As we ate, Angie lingered in my thoughts. "Will I see you again?" I inquired. "Return next week for paperwork with your parole officer." "We can have lunch then," she agreed, softening slightly. After lunch, we returned to the office. When she extended her hand, I held it briefly, pondering her thoughts. We bid farewell, and I eagerly anticipated our next lunch. Her secretary's smile hinted at the rarity of such interactions, a testament to Angie's uniqueness. I returned to work, swiftly completing tasks as if it were second nature. My colleagues seemed to regard me with newfound respect, and no one dared to challenge me. For 2 consecutive Mondays, I met with Angie, initially maintaining a professional relationship. However, by the 4th week, she informed me that our business collaboration had ceased. "Are you still my lawyer?" I inquired. "Certainly. Call me if you encounter any issues," she assured. "Angie, I regret to inform you that I must terminate our arrangement," I confessed. "Terminate? After all I've done to assist you?" she exclaimed. "Yes. I desire more than a professional connection. I want to take you on a genuine date. Get to know you better," I expressed. "Ray, I'm conflicted. There's an attraction, but what will people think?" she pondered. "I don't care about perceptions. Just join me once. If it doesn't feel right, we won't repeat it. Let's follow our hearts," I urged. After hesitation, she reluctantly agreed. "I'll go, but don't expect anything more," she cautioned, surprised by her own words. Angie agreed, and on Saturday, we took a drive. I borrowed a car from my sister, opting not to use my old truck. Arriving at her townhouse, I was greeted by a stunning woman as she opened the door. Despite individual perceptions, to me, she appeared breathtaking. Resisting the urge to embrace her immediately, I reminded myself to act as a gentleman, though it wasn't easy. At a fancy restaurant, we enjoyed wine followed by dinner. Afterward, we conversed while listening to music. "Angie, tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up? I noticed your last name differs from your father's," I inquired. "You know my story, Ray. My parents' relationship was troubled, ending in my father's incarceration for the past 14 years. Raised by extended family, I, the youngest, was only 14 when it all unfolded. It was a difficult time. Despite loving him, my siblings couldn't forgive our father for his actions. I harbored guilt for revealing my mother's infidelity to him. Perhaps if I had stayed silent, things might have been different. Angie, you shouldn't blame yourself for your mom's decease or your dad's imprisonment. You were just a child trying to do the right thing," I reassured her. After my father was incarcerated, I resolved to attend college and pursue a career in law, hoping to assist him with a lighter sentence. That's why I specialized in criminal law. Despite my efforts, there wasn't much I could do for him, Angie explained. As for your question about my marital status, I wasn't married long, and it's not something I want to discuss, she replied with a smile. Ray, can we table this conversation for another time? I'm enjoying our evening together, and I'd rather not dwell on these topics. Would you like to dance? She suggested. I'm not much of a dancer, but I'd love to hold you close, I responded. As we danced, I embraced Angie, cherishing the moment. Ray, I have trust issues, especially with men due to my social circles. I'm just being upfront with you. If it weren't for my father's intervention, I might not have agreed to this date, Angie admitted. I'll make sure to send your father some extra cigarettes. Angie, you mean a lot to me, and I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust. If I overstep, just let me know, and I'll respect your boundaries, I promised. When I dropped her off that night, I kissed her at the door, leaving her in silence. She kissed me again and leaned back. Can I come in, Angie? Not today, Ray. It's too soon. Maybe next Saturday? That could work. Give me a call on Thursday. I returned home, filled with happiness. We got together the next 2 Saturdays. During our time together, she opened up more. Ray, I want you to know me better. If we're going to keep seeing each other, I won't hide anything. I've been married before, as I mentioned. It happened during my freshman year of college. My boyfriend and I thought we were in love, so we got married after I got pregnant. But we soon realized we were too young, and the marriage failed. I had a mishap, and we ended up divorcing. I kept the last name Brady to distance myself from my maiden name Miller, as my father insisted. I felt relieved that she trusted me with her story. She asked about my kids, expressing interest in meeting them. I had already told them about her, and my daughter was eager to meet her. Angie, would you like to join us? My sister is hosting a family barbecue next Saturday, and you're invited. It would mean a lot to me if you came. I knew it was a significant step for us. She avoided eye contact, indicating she understood the importance of this invitation. After a deep breath, she looked at me and kissed me passionately, a first for us. Pulling back, she took another breath. Okay, Ray, I'll come. What can I bring? I wasn't sure what women typically brought to these gatherings, so I suggested Amy could discuss it with her. When I informed Amy about Angie attending the party, the guest list expanded. Everyone wanted to meet her. My parents, cousins, aunts, and uncles all showed up. Angie offered to make potato salad. Amy mentioned how sweet Angie sounded on the phone, hinting at her hopes for our relationship. Every weekend, I visited Deb's house to pick up my kids. We'd either hang out at Amy's or do something fun together. I asked about their mother respectfully. Kyle mentioned she was dating a man, which concerned me initially. But Kayla reassured me. He was their schoolteacher named Pat. He'd lost his wife to leukemia and had moved to start anew. He had a daughter their age, whom Kyle and Kayla liked. I need to tell you something, Deb. Your deceit and infidelity destroyed us. If you value this man, treat him right. Most importantly, be truthful with him. Don't repeat the same mistakes you made with us. Pat cares for our children and treats them well. He's aware of your existence and acknowledges you as their father. I hope things work out for us. I hope I haven't tarnished your future relationships. Ray, you're a decent man, and I believe you'll find the right partner. I'm just sorry for the pain I caused you. After bidding farewell, I drove home. I rented a small apartment about a mile from Deb and the kids. Opted for a 2-bedroom place so the kids have a spot when they're with me. I still swing by Amy's a couple times a week, usually for a meal, but I enjoy visiting them too. As the barbecue day arrived, I felt anxious. Waiting outside, I felt immense relief seeing Angie's car pull up. She greeted me with a smile, offering a bowl of potato salad. "Make sure to have some," she teased. She looked stunning. I couldn't see her any other way. Being with her made me feel elated. I realized I'd fallen for her, even though we'd only shared kisses. Some things you just know. I hoped she felt something for me too. Introducing her as my good friend, I watched as she mingled with everyone. Mom and Dad instantly took a liking to her. Dad even quipped, "Don't let her get away, Ray. We already adore her and we barely know her." Angie glanced at me and smiled. When I introduced her to Amy, their mutual glance seemed like positive reinforcement. "Ray, I never mentioned this, but I encountered your sister during the parole interviews. I didn't bring it up as it wasn't relevant until now. I never anticipated we'd become acquaintances. I assured you of my honesty, which is why I'm disclosing this now. Amy and I hadn't communicated since your parole until she contacted me about the potato salad. Have you conversed with anyone else I should be aware of?" "Yes, I've spoken to Deb, your ex-wife, Sue, and Bob, naturally. Additionally, I liaised with your employer to secure your position considering those involved in the bar incident and your arrest. I handled all of this as your legal representative." I never foresaw developing feelings for you, especially without meeting. I regret not divulging this earlier, but as your attorney, I needed to ascertain the truth before fully supporting you. If you want me to depart, please say so, and I'll oblige. "Leave, leave." All I heard was your declaration of love for me. I embraced her with a kiss, followed by a hug, and then introduced her to the rest of the family. I informed Angie I'd return shortly as I needed to pick up the kids, who were eager to meet her. Upon my return, Kayla approached and introduced herself to Angie. "Hi, I'm Kayla. Are you Daddy's girlfriend? You're really pretty."
Just like Daddy said. "Hi, Kayla. You can call me Angie or AJ. You're a very pretty girl, too. It's really nice to meet you," Kayla then said. "Come meet my older brother. He's 10 and a bit shy around girls. Kyle, this is AJ, Daddy's friend." I observed Kyle shaking Angie's hand. She knelt down to chat with the kids at their level. The way they interacted indicated they were likely to become friends. I joined them, and Kyle, not typically talkative,
Told me, "We like her, Daddy. She's so pretty and sweet." Angie simply glanced at me and smiled. The barbecue was fantastic as the evening progressed. While chatting with Angie, Kyle and Kayla approached us. "Dad, remember you mentioned going to the amusement park in 2 weeks? Can Angie come with us? That way, when Kayla and I ride the attractions, you'll have someone to talk to." I attempted to convey to Kyle that such inquiries should be made in private. Angie might have other commitments or might not enjoy amusement parks. He glanced at Angie and apologized to her. "Sorry, Angie. I didn't realize you weren't fond of amusement parks." Angie chuckled and knelt down, addressing Kyle. "Sweetheart, what your daddy means is that those questions are better asked to him privately, not me. As for amusement parks, I adore them and would love to go. If it's all right with your daddy, perhaps you and I can enjoy the roller coaster together." Sure enough, we all headed to the amusement park, where the kids eagerly rode every attraction. Angie kept her promise to Kyle and rode the roller coaster with him, as well as the Ferris wheel. On our way back, Kayla remarked, "Dad, you should get a car instead of your truck. Angie can't always use hers. We won't all fit in your truck." We chuckled at Kayla's observation, realizing she was correct. Over the following weeks, I didn't see much of Angie. Work kept me busy on weekends, and she had court obligations. Although we spoke on the phone occasionally, it wasn't the same. One Saturday, I picked up the kids, and we decided to visit Chuck E. Cheese's, a pizza place with various games and prizes. After arriving home, Kayla asked if she could invite Angie to join us. Not wanting to disappoint her, I agreed to call Angie. Angie, I called out. Angie, it's Ray. Kayla wanted me to give you a call. Any plans for tonight? Oh, hey, Ray. I was going out with some friends. Oh, okay. Have a great time. Ray, you mentioned Kayla wanted to talk to me. Can you put her on the line, please? It's all right, Angie. Sure, that'd be nice. Could you pass the phone to Kayla? I could only hear one side of the conversation. Hey, Angie, Dad's taking Kyle and me to Chuck E. Cheese's for pizza and games. We thought you might want to join us. Yeah, okay. I'll let him know we miss you too. All right, bye. I felt bad for Kayla. I'm sorry, honey, but Angie already has plans. What do you mean, Dad? She said she'd be here in half an hour. She mentioned she's getting a car, so she doesn't always have to use hers. Yeah, Daddy, she said she misses us. Later that evening, after we returned from a pizza party where the kids won a bunch of stuffed animals thanks to Angie's skills at the games, I dropped them off at their mom's house. Angie expressed her desire for us to get to know each other better. We headed to my apartment and settled on the couch. Angie, you know I care about you, right? I wouldn't be here if I didn't. I want to be engaged with you. I haven't trusted a man in a long time. All I ask is for you to be gentle and caring. I don't want to feel used. I want to feel loved. We began on the couch and eventually moved to the bedroom, indulging in whatever pleased us. I pampered her feet with massages, licked whipped cream off her stomach, and explored every sensation. We spent hours caressing, massaging, and expressing our love. Holding her in my arms after lovemaking was when I felt most content. It was comforting to cuddle and feel her close to me, something I hadn't experienced in a long while. She ended up staying the entire night. I rose before her and prepared French toast for us. Emerging from the bedroom, she wore one of my t-shirts, which looked particularly fetching on her. I couldn't help but express my admiration for how wonderful she looked, even in the morning. After a quick shower, we sat down to talk. Angie, what do you envision for our future? You know how much I love you, and my children and family adore you. What are your thoughts on what comes next? Ray, I feel like I'm sounding like a lawyer. We've only known each other for a few months, and last night was our first time making love. I understand it's early, but I want you in my life every day. If we haven't had our fill of love, we can return to the bedroom and spend the whole day there. Angie smiled at the suggestion. Angie, I want you to be my wife. Will you marry me? Tears welled in Angie's eyes. Ray, I want you to know I don't take love lightly. I've made mistakes before, as I've told you. Yes, I will marry you. I promise to always be there for you and the kids. I know the pain of your past marriage, and I vow to be honest and faithful. I expect the same from you. She leaned in and kissed me passionately. Honey, what's on your mind? You seem happy yet sad, I inquired. These are my reflections on my dad, and how joyful he will be. Many young girls dream of their special wedding day, envisioning themselves in a white dress, escorted down the aisle by their father to meet their future spouse. I realize that won't be my reality, and it saddens me deeply. She shed quiet tears. Last time, my father wasn't even aware of my wedding. By the time I reached out to him, I had suffered a mishap and was on the path to divorce. I'm sorry, Ray, I shouldn't dwell on this now. After all, I'm marrying the man my father approves of, the one I've loved since our first meeting. What? You loved me from the start. I've wanted you since I laid eyes on you, but I guess you already knew that, I remarked, surprised. She gave me a sweet smile and asked when I wanted to set the date. I responded that it was entirely up to her. We both agreed it should happen as soon as possible. I asked if I could start spreading the news, and she said she would do the same. We just needed to settle on a date. We settled on 2 months from then. For the next few days, I was elated. I shared the news with Amy and her husband Kenny, who were thrilled for us. I needed to inform the kids. I called their home and connected with them both through the console so I could share the news simultaneously. They both exclaimed their happiness and expressed their fondness for Angie. I assured them it was happening in a couple of months, and that they were among the first to know. When I entered Angie's office, her secretary Mary congratulated me. She informed me that Angie had already spread the news and invited everyone to the wedding reception. Mary then called Angie and beckoned me in. Angie was waiting, tears silently streaming down her face. What's wrong, Angie? I called the prison, spoke to the warden, and requested a day's leave for my dad to attend our wedding. He informed me that my dad is prohibited from leaving the prison under any circumstances. His life sentence is final. He expressed regret, but said there was nothing he could do. I'm deeply sorry, Angie. I understand how much your father's presence means to you. It's deteriorating, Ray. Despite being in remission, Dad's cancer has resurfaced. He has 3 to 6 months left. Tears welled in her eyes, and I enveloped her in my arms. Why, Lord? Why put her through this? She's a good soul. My heart ached for her. Angie, I've been buying cigarettes for your dad since I got out. It was a deal between us. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. Dad doesn't smoke anymore. He uses the packs sent to him to trade with other inmates. You didn't cause his cancer. An idea sparked in my mind, but I hesitated to share it with Angie, not wanting to extinguish her hope. I kissed her goodbye, promising to see her the next day. I skipped work and headed to the prison to meet Keeler and the warden. Keeler greeted me with a smile. You take care of my girl, Ray. Just make her happy. She deserves better than what life's thrown her way. I pitched my idea to Keeler, met with initial resistance, but eventually secured his agreement pending the warden's approval. I bid him farewell, heading to the warden's office. The warden welcomed me. Well, Ray, I see you're staying composed and getting hitched. Sorry about Keeler, but as a lifer, we can't release him for his daughter's wedding. Warden, are you fully in charge here, making most decisions? What's your angle, Ray? Can we hold the wedding on the hotel premises, use the chapel, and Keeler can walk his daughter down the aisle? You want to marry here in prison just so her father can attend? That it? Yes, sir. She hasn't seen him in over 14 years, and he's on his end of the rope. We only need the chapel for the ceremony. I know weddings have happened here before. All right, Ray. I'll arrange it. Keep it small. You can invite 3 guests besides yourselves. Let Keeler bring some fellow inmates. You'll need a prison attendant. I expressed gratitude to the warden and hurried back to Keeler. Dave, I called him by name, and he chuckled. The warden green-lighted the plan. I'm off to tell Angie. Thanks, Dave. It means the world to her. He smiled. Ray, jot down this number. I noted it down for Angie. When you visit the bank, ask Angie to bring her birth certificate. The account is registered under her maiden name. I jotted down, expressing sympathy for Dave's illness. Just look after my little girl, that's all I ask, Dave responded. Returning to Angie's office, she noticed my smile and inquired what was happening. You don't mind getting married in prison? I questioned. What? What's this about, Ray? I recounted my conversation with the warden, mentioning that her father would be permitted to walk her down the aisle. Tears of joy welled up in her eyes. God, I love you, Ray. I informed her about the safety deposit box, and we proceeded to inspect its contents. I'm Angelina Juanita Miller, and I'd like to access my safety deposit box, Angie informed the attendant, who examined her birth certificate. He escorted us to the safe deposit box, unlocked it, and exited the room. The first thing we noticed was a note from her father. Dear Angie, if you're opening this box, it means you're either getting married or I've already passed away. I hope it's the former. In the little box is your mother's engagement ring. I know everyone wondered where it went, but I put it here for safekeeping. I want you to have it and wear it with pride. Your mother had her faults, but she loved you, and I know she would want you to have her wedding ring. There are also bonds here, totaling over $15,000 that will help pay for your wedding. I formalized them before I was sent away. When you see your brother and sister, tell them there's a box for each of them, too, if they haven't gotten theirs yet. Only yours has a ring in it. Congratulations, and always be honest with your husband. With love, Daddy. Angie and I discussed our wedding plans, opting to invite her brother Brad and sister Lisa, along with my sister Amy. We plan to extend invitations to family and friends for the reception, scheduled shortly after the ceremony. Angie and Amy dedicated the following month to preparing for the event, although it incurred additional expenses due to the short notice. However, I was determined to fulfill as much of Angie's dream as possible. Amy volunteered to capture the event with her digital camera. We visited Angie's siblings, where she introduced me to them. They clarified that while they didn't harbor animosity towards their father, they disapproved of his actions. Angie elucidated the significance of the wedding and the circumstances surrounding it, leading Brad and Lisa to tears upon learning of their father's terminal condition. After agreeing to attend, Angie provided them with their bank deposit box numbers, revealing their father's unexpected provisions. On the wedding day, Angie and I drove to the prison together, accompanied by Amy and her husband, who waited in the car. Upon our arrival, I arranged for a costume for Keeler, delivered by a guard, while I donned the rented tuxedo. Amy assisted Angie with her wedding attire in another room, as Angie preferred I not see her until the ceremony. Inside the chapel, I awaited Angie's entrance alongside Brad and Lisa, who would serve as my best man and Angie's maid of honor, respectively. A prisoner played the piano, setting a solemn atmosphere, while additional prisoners, friends of Keeler Dave, were seated. The warden, accompanied by the priest, announced refreshments after the ceremony, displaying unexpected kindness. As "Here Comes the Bride" filled the chapel, everyone rose to their feet. Angie entered, escorted by her father, tears streaming down both their faces. Angie's wish had been granted. Her father would walk her down the aisle on her wedding day. Once they reached the front, the audience took their seats, leaving only the small wedding party standing. Another guard entered and shut the door. The priest inquired, "Who presents this woman to marry this man?" "Yes, sir," Dave responded proudly before taking his seat. "Angelina Juanita Miller Brady, do you accept Raymond Michael Harper as your husband?" The priest proceeded with the ceremony, posing the same question to me. We both solemnly affirmed, "To love and cherish from this day forward." It reflected our mutual commitment. Nothing would ever come between us. With challenging pasts, we were determined to make our marriage succeed. After exchanging vows, I kissed the bride. Angie then embraced and kissed her father. We adjourned to an adjoining room to chat briefly and partake in cake and punch provided by the warden. Brad and Lisa approached their father, embracing him for the first time in nearly 15 years. Tears flowed, mingling joy with remorse. Aware of their father's terminal condition, they sought to reaffirm their love for him. Amy documented moments throughout the ceremony, capturing heartfelt interactions among Dave and his children. Her photos, encompassing tears, embraces, and even some laughter, were swiftly developed and enlarged at a 24-hour photo center. Expressing gratitude to Dave and the warden for fulfilling Angie's wish, we bid them farewell. As we departed, Brad and Lisa were still engaged in conversation with their father, a heartening sight. Returning to town for the reception, we were greeted enthusiastically by all our invited guests. Kyle and Kayla eagerly embraced us upon our arrival, their excitement palpable. Entering the auditorium, we were met with jubilant cheers. Tears welled in the eyes of my parents and nearly everyone who greeted us. Angie's friends, many unfamiliar to me, also welcomed us warmly. Notably, Mary approached, offering hugs of congratulations. Around 30 minutes later, Amy arrived with the photographs. She enlarged several of them and laid them out on the table for everyone to view. Brad and Lisa stopped by to collect their families. Brad was accompanied by his wife and 2 children, while Lisa was with her husband and 3 children. They all gathered around Dave's picture, explaining to the kids that he was their grandfather. Amy informed them that she had taken 4 sets of photos, and after the reception, each family would receive 1 set to take home. There was one for Brad and Lisa, one for Angie and me, and naturally, one for Amy. I must mention how stunning Angie looked in her wedding gown. If she had wings, she would have resembled an angel sent by God. She was the most exquisite woman I had ever seen, and now she was my wife. I believe most men feel similarly about their wives. We danced, dined, and danced some more, accompanied by the clinking of glasses. Our lips were practically inseparable throughout the evening. Colleagues at work told me I was incredibly fortunate, but trust me, I didn't need to be reminded. I knew I had found something precious, and I intended to cherish it forever. For those curious, Deb and Pat were absent from our wedding. It was Angie's special day, and I wanted nothing to mar it. Witnessing her and her father walking down the aisle, seeing her brother and sister reconcile with their father, and witnessing the family coming together once more. These are moments I will never forget. Update. It's been 6 months since our wedding. Debbie and Pat tied the knot last month. I'm glad to see Debbie making a genuine effort to turn her life around. My kids report that Pat is treating them well. I inquired about Aunt Sue and Uncle Bob, and my kids informed me they relocated to another state. I transitioned to the day shift to spend more time with the kids and be home with Angie every night. Angie became pregnant with our baby 3 months after our wedding. Dave Keeler passed away. The kids visited him monthly until his passing. It was a somber moment, but we were able to share the news of Angie's pregnancy with him. We informed him it was a boy, and we planned to name him David Raymond. That brought a smile to Dave's face. Reflecting on everything, the betrayal of my cheating wife, meeting the woman of my dreams in prison, and marrying her, I realize I'm starting anew and preparing to become a father once more. Not a day passes without me thanking God for all I have. I'm grateful for the opportunity He's given Angie and me to find happiness again. That's all.